Chapter 239. Your Majesty, there's definitely a sign in Guan Osprey Palace. Wait. Zhu Chen narrowed his eyes and furrowed his brows. He pinched his fingers as he searched for the right direction. He only stopped when he reached the swing in Pear Blossom Garden. Your Majesty, if this humble daoist's calculations aren't wrong, there's definitely a sign down there, said Zhu Chen firmly, his gaze sharp. Guards. Dig. Yi Hongyi's gaze was heavy as he looked at Yarrow Moen in his arms meaningfully. At this time, the guards had already found a shovel and started digging. Be gentler. If the sign of heavenly mandate is damaged, it's considered inauspicious, reminded Zhu Chen urgently. The guards naturally understood the severity of this, so they threw away their shovels and started digging with their hands. About 5 minutes later, one of the guards suddenly cried out in surprise. I see it. I see it. Everyone rushed over when they heard this. At this time, a large Ganoderma had appeared in front of them. The Ganoderma's shell was dark purple and glowed with a faint light. When it first appeared, white smoke rose. That's strange. Why would a Ganoderma grow in the soil? Muttered Ting Yu in shock. PFFF. Right at this time, Zhu Chen suddenly coughed up blood and stumbled to the ground. How could this be? Guards, hurry and help Daoist priest up. When Yi Hongyi saw this, he immediately ordered the guards to help Zhu Chen to his side. Your Majesty. In order to make Your Majesty believe this humble Daoist had just revealed the heavenly secrets. Now, his lifespan has been cut short because of the wrath of the heavens. This Ganoderma's name is Purple Light, it's an auspicious sign. Your Majesty must move it to Central Dragon Palace and nurture it well. Your Majesty will definitely live as long as the heavens. After Zhu Chen said this, he immediately fell unconscious. Daoist priest. Guards. Hurry and send Daoist priest to the Imperial Hospital, said Yi Hongyi worriedly. Once the guards carried Zhu Chen out of Guan Osprey Palace, Yi Hongyi immediately ordered the gardener to move the Ganoderma into a high-quality porcelain pot and bring it back to Central Dragon Palace. At dinner, Yarrow Moen, who had been busy the entire day, leaned back tiredly on the chaise lounge and lightly stroked Fluffy's fur. It's impossible to find such a large lingji in the entire Imperial Palace. How did you get it? Yi Junqing sat down at the table and looked towards Yarrow Moen in confusion. Just because the Imperial Palace doesn't have something doesn't mean that Phoenix Feather Manor doesn't have it. Yarrow Moen's cherry lips curved into a smile as her eyes lit up. Poor Yang Nansheng. In this prince's opinion, even if Zhu Chen's performance today was extraordinary, His Majesty might not necessarily believe him. The scene of Yang Nansheng coughing up blood while leaning on the table suddenly appeared in Yi Junqing's mind. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Of course not. Moen is waiting. Yarrow Moen's lips curved into a smile as a light flashed through her eyes. Wait for what? Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moen curiously. At this moment, Yin Shui descended from the sky with an account book that was more than half a foot tall. Niang Niang, the things you've been waiting for have arrived. As Yin Shui spoke, she placed around 100 account books by Yarrow Moen's side. Ian, bring the side table over, and my treasures as well. Yarrow Moen ordered indifferently before sitting down on the chaise lounge. When Yin Shui placed the golden abacus in front of Yarrow Moen, Yi Junqing stood up in shock and walked over to Yarrow Moen. What's this? Yi Junqing saw the words Yarrow's Silk and Satin Factory written on the top of the account book and became suspicious. It's time to calculate just how much wealth Moen has. Yarrow Moen casually picked up the account book and flicked the abacus around with one hand. Then she flipped through the account book, her jade-like fingers dancing on the abacus. Her movements were elegant as if she was playing a zither, and the sound was crisp and pleasing to the ear. Only now did Yi Junqing notice that there were beads made from white jade, jadeite, and colored glass mixed into the golden abacus. That was why they made such a pleasant sound when they touched each other. This is Meng Yuan's account book. There's this much. Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moen in shock. Isn't it good to have more? In the future, if Prince encounters trouble, you can always seek shelter with Moen. With this wealth, it wouldn't be a problem for Prince to not have to worry about food and clothing. Yarrow Moen raised her bright eyes slightly. This prince doesn't want to live that kind of life of relying on someone else's charity, said Yi Junqing angrily. Then what kind of life is Prince living right now? Yarrow Mo Wan smiled lightly as her fingers moved quickly. Her movements were as smooth as a whirlwind. Speechless, Yi Junqing stormed off in a fit of pique. The next day, when Zhu Chen woke up from his coma, the first thing he thought of was to lick his teeth with his tongue to make sure that he had swallowed the blood sac in time. Daoist priest is awake. A gentle voice brushed past his ears like a spring breeze. When Zhu Chen turned to look at the source of the voice, he was shocked to see a pitilessly beautiful face appear in front of him. This humble Daoist. Just as Zhu Chen was about to get up, Yarrow Sulwan pressed down on his shoulder. Daoist priest's body is weak, there's no need to bow. As Yarrow Moan spoke, she brought the teacup in her hands to Zhu Chen's lips. This humble Daoist, thanks noble consort for your concern. When Zhu Chen felt Yarrow Sulwan's fingers caressing his shoulder, he couldn't help but swallow and speak hoarsely. Sulwan and Daoist priest have met a few times before. Yesterday, when I heard that Daoist priest had vomited blood and fainted, Sulwan felt uneasy and couldn't sleep the entire night. That's why I snuck into remote realm courtyard to visit. It's a good thing that Daoist priest is fine, otherwise Sulwan's heart would. Yarrow Sulwan's beautiful eyes glowed with endless charm as she subconsciously moved her hand from Zhu Chen's shoulder to his chest. Zhu Chen thanks noble consort for your concern. As Zhu Chen spoke, he took the teacup with both hands and seemed to unconsciously move backwards. Since Daoist priest is fine, Sulwan will return to the palace first. I'll visit again later. Yarrow Sulwan knew that she couldn't stay in remote realm courtyard for long, so she reluctantly withdrew her hand and turned to leave. As he watched Yarrow Sulwan walk out of the room, Zhu Chen couldn't help but sigh in relief. That was close, he almost couldn't control himself. Who are you? Millimeter. Just as Zhu Chen was about to relax, a figure suddenly flashed past. Inside Guan Osprey Palace, Yin Shui had reported everything she had seen to Yarrow Moan. TSK, what a pity. How could Daoist priest refuse such a beauty in front of him? Yarrow Moan looked towards Zhu Chen with a regretful expression as she raised a hand to indicate that he should get up. This humble Daoist swears that this humble Daoist definitely doesn't have the slightest bit of desire towards noble consort Li. Your Highness, please understand. Zhu Chen knew very well that Yarrow Sulwan was this god of plague's second older sister. Even if he wanted a woman, there was no need for him to touch the ground on top of the god's head. Ever since that night, Zhu Chen understood one thing from the bottom of his heart. He would rather die than offend this ancestor in front of him. As for what exactly happened that night, Zhu Chen wouldn't say it even if he was beaten to death. Why? Second older sister isn't pretty? Can't enter Daoist priest's eyes? Yarrow Moan's eyes widened as she asked this. That's not it. Then that's for the best. Listen well, if Yarrow Sulwan tries to get her hands on you again, there's no need for you to be polite. If there's a flower to be plucked, then pluck it. Don't wait until there's no flower and only the branch, understand? Yarrow Moan lifted her brows as she instructed him solemnly. This isn't good, right? Zhu Chen looked towards Yarrow Moan timidly as he spoke. Of course not. Since second older sister has needs, you just have to satisfy her. If this consort finds out that you're pretending to be virtuous again, be careful of throwing you into the cleaning room. If there's something you can't use, you might as well just cut it off. Yarrow Moan looked towards Zhu Chen seriously. She didn't seem to be joking at all. Chapter 240. This humble Daoist guarantees that noble consort Li will be satisfied, said Zhu Chen confidently. 5 days from now, the purple Lingji mushroom in Central Dragon Palace will become dispirited and lose all of its luster. Do you know what to do at that time? Yarrow Moan had already sprinkled some medicinal powder on the Lingji when she buried it. This humble Daoist understands. Zhu Chen nodded firmly. Yin Shui, send him back. Yarrow Moan looked at Yin Shui meaningfully. Yin Shui naturally understood her master's meaning, so before sending Zhu Chen back to Realm Separation Courtyard, she first threw him into Jade Lake for a swim. As a result, Zhu Chen caught a cold on the night he returned. He only got better on the day he received Yi Hongyi's imperial edict. Inside Central Dragon Palace, Yi Hongyi's brows were tightly furrowed as he looked coldly at the Lingji by the window. We ask you, why is this Lingji so dispirited? Yi Hongyi looked towards Zhu Chen angrily. After that day, the reason Yi Hongyi hadn't gone to find Zhu Chen was because Zhu Chen had once been second imperial brother's retainer. Yi Hongyi was still a bit wary of him rashly using it. Why is it like this? Zhu Chen quickly walked up to the Lingji and muttered worriedly with furrowed brows. His Majesty is asking you right now, what kind of answer is that? Ever since Zhu Chen had entered, and Bingshan's gaze had landed on Zhu Chen. He wanted to glare Zhu Chen to death. Your Majesty, please wait a moment. Let this humble daoist calculate first. Zhu Chen ignored Bingshan's mockery and suddenly raised his horsetail whisk. He circled around Central Dragon Palace a few times before finally stopping in front of the secret door. Forgive this humble daoist for saying something disrespectful, but there are filthy things inside Central Dragon Palace and the miasma is extremely strong. This isn't something the Lingji can endure, said Zhu Chen seriously as he paced back and forth in front of the secret door. Bullshit. You. In his shock and anger, Bingshan forgot that Yi Hongyi was present and immediately cursed. Bingshan. Yi Hongyi looked towards Bingshan coldly. Only when he saw the fury on his dragon face did Bingshan realize that he had lost control of himself. He immediately bent down in front of Yi Hongyi. Your Majesty, please don't listen to this evil daoist's nonsense. Central Dragon Palace is the residence of the Son of Heaven, so how could it be filthy? It's clearly because the Lingji mushroom wasn't feeling well after it was unearthed that it's withering away. Bingshan argued. Ien, we are also considering this. Daoist priest, do you think Unicorn's words make sense? In the end, Yi Hongyi had been by his side for many years, so he didn't think too deeply about Bingshan's rudeness. If your Majesty doesn't believe me, you can very well move the Lingji out of Central Dragon Palace. Fortunately, the Lingji's foundation hasn't been damaged. This humble daoist dares to use his head to guarantee that as long as it leaves Central Dragon Palace, the Lingji will definitely reappear, Zhu Chen solemnly vowed. Your Majesty, why don't you move this Lingji to this old servant's room? This old servant will definitely take good care of it, suggested Bingshan. Forgive this humble daoist for saying too much, but the Lingji is an immortal herb, so how could this servant's fate possibly affect it? If it's moved to Unicorn's room, it'll probably die even faster. How could Zhu Chen not guess Bingshan's ploy? He immediately spoke up to stop him. Forget it, bring it back to Guan Osprey Palace first. All of you can withdraw. We want to rest. Yi Hongyi felt a dull pain in his forehead, then waved his hands to dismiss the two of them before walking into the inner room. At this time, there were already guards carrying the Lingji out of Central Dragon Palace. Zhu Chen naturally swaggered out. Stop. Bingshan chased after him. Unicorn, do you need something? Asked Zhu Chen angrily as he looked towards Bingshan with raised brows. Zhu Chen, what do you know? Bingshan refused to believe that Zhu Chen had stood in that position on purpose. Unicorn's question is rather strange. This humble daoist doesn't even know how to reply. Zhu Chen looked towards Bingshan with a confused expression, but a trace of delight flashed through his heart. Being able to see Bingshan's trembling expression made it worth it for him to enter the imperial palace again. Stop fooling around. Tell me, what exactly is your goal in coming to the imperial palace? For glory, splendor, and wealth. Since that's the case, with this senior brother of mine protecting you, you'll definitely be able to stabilize your position as state preceptor. Bingshan stated his conditions. It's thanks to having a senior brother like Eunuch and that Zhu Chen ended up in such a crushing defeat. Zhu Chen is greatly indebted to the second prince. If it weren't for you, would the second prince have died so miserably? Eunuch has also lived in this world for a long time, so you should understand that a debt of blood must be paid with blood, said Zhu Chen in a low voice as he moved closer to Bingshan's side. His every word was like ice. You think you can touch a single hair on this one's head? Me. Bingshan angrily flung his sleeves and left, but his heart was filled with fear and unease. If it weren't for the fact that something had gone wrong with the pills, he wouldn't have been this afraid. However, His Majesty had already started to use this batch of pills. If he asked His Majesty to take the pills back, it would definitely arouse His Majesty's suspicions. Rather than that, why not? As he watched Bingshan leave, Ju Chen's lips curved in a cold smile. As long as he could achieve his goal, he was willing to be used. Ju Chen was very grateful towards Yarrow Moen. 3 days later, when Yi Hongyi appeared in Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moen was currently sleeping on the chaise longue. Fluffy and Jewel were lying lazily in her arms, sleeping very sweetly. When Yi Hongyi saw the lovely person on the chaise longue, he momentarily forgot himself and walked over. His slightly rough fingertips brushed against Yarrow Moen's delicate face. How long had it been since he had been near her body? Just a simple touch was already enough to make his body stir, but he couldn't. Recently, his body had been unable to endure this kind of heat. Your Majesty, you're here. Yarrow Moen suddenly opened her eyes. There was a hint of immaturity on her beautiful face, causing Yi Hongyi to be even more unable to resist pressing her down. We came to see WN and also to see how the Lingji is doing. Yi Hongyi resisted the urge to move his fingers away and turned to look at the Lingji by the window. When he saw the Lingji glowing with a faint purple light, as if it had been reborn, Yi Hongyi's eyes abruptly turned cold. Your Majesty, don't worry. Those gardeners come over every day to fertilize and add soil to the Lingji. They take very good care of it. It's a pity that WN doesn't know how, otherwise I would definitely personally take good care of the Lingji for Your Majesty. Yarrow Moen cheerfully walked over to Yi Hongyi, her tender voice as pleasant as an oriole's. This Lingji is only taken care of by the gardeners. Yi Hongyi lowered his eyes to look towards Yarrow Moen. That's right. WN hasn't let Yi Junqing enter this room for the past 2 days, said Yarrow Moen seriously as she nodded firmly. Why? Yi Hongyi looked towards Yarrow Moen in confusion. He's always so clumsy. What if he knocks over Your Majesty's treasure? Replied Yarrow Moen earnestly. In reality, Yarrow Moen was afraid that someone would use the matter of the Lingji's revival to insinuate that Yi Junqing had the fate of an emperor. In this imperial palace, she had to be careful. WN is considerate. We forgot that we still have important matters to take care of. Sleep a bit more, we'll come over to accompany you later. Yi Hongyi forced out a smile and patted Yarrow Moen's head, then turned to leave Guan Osprey Palace. As Yarrow Moen watched Yi Hongyi hurriedly leave, her lips curved in a strange smile. The gentleman had already entered the trap, the wonderful show was about to begin. Inside the imperial study, Yi Hongyi tossed the memorial on the table onto Bingshan's head. His eyes were dark. Your Majesty, please investigate clearly. There are no problems with the pills this old servant has refined, they will only ensure Your Majesty's longevity. They definitely aren't filthy things. Your Majesty, please don't listen to that demonic Daoist's lies. Your Majesty, do you still remember that he's an old subordinate of the second prince? This old servant had long suspected that this demonic Daoist had some ulterior motive for entering the imperial palace again. This old servant also found out that the second prince once saved this demonic Daoist's entire family. It's very likely that he entered the imperial palace this time to get revenge for the second prince. Your Majesty, if this person isn't eliminated, there will be endless troubles in the future. Bingshan had expected that the Lingji would come back to life, but he hadn't expected that Yi Hongyi would have such a big reaction and immediately punish him. Chapter 241. Revenge. Tell us, what right does he have to take revenge for Yi Mohan, based on that mouth of his? Yi Hongyi clearly didn't believe Bingshan's words. Your Majesty, please think about it. Why did that Lingji have to appear right when he came? This old servant. Bingshan knelt on the ground in panic. He knew very well that the only reason Your Majesty had been indulging him all these years was because of the pill refining room. If something happened to the pill refining room, he wouldn't be far from death. That's because there's no such expert in the imperial palace. Do you think we're an idiot? We ordered people to investigate the roots of the Lingji, and the people in the greenhouse clearly told us that the Lingji has lived in Guan Osprey Palace for at least 300 years. You can't be saying that Zhu Chen colluded with the gardener to trick us, right? We also investigated. That gardener has been in the greenhouse ever since he entered the palace at the age of 10. He doesn't know who Zhu Chen is at all. And Bingshan, what else do you have to say? Yi Hongyi slammed the table angrily. If it wasn't for the fact that he had been in a daze recently, he wouldn't have suspected the pills just because of Zhu Chen's words. Your Majesty is wise. This old servant has been refining pills for your Majesty for all these years and has done everything personally. This old servant has personally tried every batch of pills. There's absolutely no problem. And Bingshan hadn't expected that Yi Hongyi would actually investigate so many things in private. He didn't dare mention the word Zhu Chen again. Then how do you explain that ever since we took the new pills you made, we've been in a daze like we're in a dream, even the matters in the palace? Go bring those pills over. Azure Dragon, you go with him. Yi Hongyi found it hard to say, so he ordered An Bingshan to bring the pills from Central Dragon Palace. He also ordered Azure Dragon to go with him to prevent An Bingshan from changing the pills. This old servant will go right away, said An Bingshan fearfully before leaving the imperial study. After An Bingshan left, Yi Hongyi ordered someone to go to Remote Realm Courtyard to invite Zhu Chen. In Remote Realm Courtyard, Yarrow Sulwan was dressed in a luxurious robe. The wide lapels of the robe revealed her beautiful neck, especially the snow-white chest. Zhu Chen gulped when he saw it. Sulwan heard that Taoism has a dual cultivation method. If Daoist priest is interested, please teach me a thing or two. Or like this. Yarrow Sulwan's jade-like fingers pressed against Zhu Chen's chest and pulled his Daoist robe down to his waist. Her coquettish voice was enough to make anyone's bones go soft. Zhu Chen knew why he had come to the palace. He originally didn't want to provoke this peach blossom, but since Yarrow Moen had decreed it, there was no need for him to have any misgivings. If noble consort Li has the heart, Zhu Chen will definitely devote himself to teaching noble consort. Zhu Chen's voice was rough and hoarse. At this moment, Zhu Chen had already tugged on Yarrow Sulwan's belt and his hands were impatiently opening the complicated clothes. When Yarrow Sulwan saw that Zhu Chen couldn't hold himself back any longer, she burrowed into his embrace. Just as the two of them were about to put on a show of their passionate entanglement, the sound of hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside. When the two of them heard the sound, they immediately panicked. Yarrow Sulwan didn't even think twice before grabbing her shoes and hiding under the bed. His Majesty has summoned the state preceptor to the imperial study for an audience, reported the eunuch outside the door. Zhu Chen hurriedly straightened his Daoist robes before opening the door. State preceptor, please. The little eunuch bent his body and walked in front. Zhu Chen reflexively turned around to glance under the bed before closing the door and leaving. In the shadows, Yarrow Moen waited until Yarrow Sulwan sneaked out of the room before turning to leave. Your Highness, this servant doesn't understand. Why would Yarrow Sulwan use her body to curry favor with Zhu Chen? Is she trying to have Zhu Chen use the art of divination to change His Majesty's opinion of her? Ting Yu looked towards her master in confusion. The conflict between her and His Majesty is irreconcilable. She knows this very well, so the possibility you mentioned doesn't exist at all. If this consort's guess isn't wrong, she might. If that's really the case, then this consort's younger sister is truly becoming more and more daring. Yarrow Moen's eyes curved and her smile was as brilliant as a flower. Inside the imperial study, Yi Hongyi handed the pill in An Bingshan's hands to Zhu Chen. Daoist priest, please take a look. What use does this pill have? Yi Hongyi's voice was soothing and his attitude was gentle. The hostility in his eyes had lessened slightly. Zhu Chen suppressed the excitement in his heart as he accepted the pill with both hands. However, when he sniffed the pill, he was inwardly shocked. According to Yarrow Moen's description, the pills An Bingshan had been refining recently were definitely poisonous. However, although the pill in his hands wasn't some good medicine that could make one live longer, it wasn't poisonous and wouldn't kill a person. There was no doubt that An Bingshan had swapped out the pills from before. Long live His Majesty. Zhu Chen suddenly had an idea. He immediately knelt in front of Yi Hongyi and raised the pill high above his head. Daoist priest, what do you mean? Yi Hongyi looked towards Ju Chen in confusion. It's the country's fortune that your majesty was able to obtain this good medicine. Ju Chen's words caused the trembling and Bingshan to burst into an uproar. Based on his understanding of Ju Chen would definitely be able to smell that this was an extremely ordinary appetizer pill. The ingredients were also the cheapest hawthorn, so there was no value to speak of. Oh, what do you mean by that, state preceptor? Yi Hongyi glanced at An Bingshan, then his gaze landed on Ju Chen. If this humble Daoist's guess is correct, this medicine should have been made from rare medicinal ingredients and a good recipe to extend one's lifespan. Even if this humble Daoist was well versed in this field, he might not have been able to come up with such an accurate recipe. Ju Chen praised the pill in his hands. Is this medicine really as miraculous as Daoist priest says? Yi Hongyi raised his brows slightly. How could this humble Daoist dare to deceive your majesty, said Ju Chen confidently. Daoist priest truly has good eyesight. Daoist priest, please stay in the palace. We will soon announce to the world that Daoist priest is appointed as state preceptor. Yi Hongyi was in a great mood and dismissed Ju Chen. Then, he comforted An Bingshan for a bit before ordering him to leave. After An Bingshan left the imperial study, the first thing he did was look for Ju Chen. Why are you helping Zijia? An Bingshan originally thought that Ju Chen would criticize the pill as being completely useless and that he wouldn't be able to escape His Majesty's blame. However, the result was completely different from what he expected. What else? Did senior brother think that Ju Chen would use this opportunity to steal senior brother's rice bowl? Ju Chen doesn't care for that kind of foul atmosphere, said Ju Chen resentfully as he placed his horsetail whisk on the table. What Zijia is asking is why you didn't use this opportunity to censure Zijia. Don't you really want Zijia to die? An Bingshan was still suspicious of Ju Chen's attitude. Based on senior brother's position in His Majesty's heart, a small appetizer pill wouldn't be able to take senior brother's life. Also, Ju Chen emphasized that if senior brother died, His Majesty would definitely push the responsibility of refining the pill onto Ju Chen. Ju Chen isn't interested in something that requires a lot of effort and doesn't bring any benefits. Ju Chen glanced at An Bingshan as he regretted missing this opportunity. It seems like you're still stubborn and insist on opposing Zijia. Since that's the case, there's no need for Zijia to accept this favor of yours. An Bingshan glared at Ju Chen before leaving angrily. That night, when Ju Chen appeared in Guan Osprey Palace, he was shocked to see Yi Junqing sitting there. He immediately took a few steps back and looked towards Yarrow Moen timidly. What kind of attitude is this? Is this prince a tiger? Can this prince eat people? Yi Junqing glanced at Ju Chen, but his hands weren't clenched into fists. Prince isn't a tiger, but he can still eat people. As Ju Chen spoke, he took another 2 steps towards Yarrow Moen. This consort is asking you, why didn't you censure An Bingshan in front of His Majesty today? Yarrow Moen fixed her gaze on Ju Chen as her cherry lips parted slightly. There wasn't a trace of emotion in her clear voice. Your Highness, please understand. This humble Daoist only did this because he didn't want to beat the grass and alert the snake. Once this humble Daoist exposed An Bingshan, His Majesty might punish him, but he definitely wouldn't bear to kill him. If An Bingshan were to change the ingredients in the pill refinement room because of this, we would no longer have any evidence to prove that the pills he refined were poisonous. This humble Daoist had no choice but to change your Highness's plans at the last minute, reported Ju Chen sincerely as he knelt on the ground. Chapter 242. His Highness lost. Ting Yu, help this consort keep His Highness Flamesoul sword properly. Yarrow Moen looked towards Yi Junqing with a faint smile. At this time, Ting Yu had already brought the Flamesoul sword to Yarrow Moen's room with both hands. Flowery demonis. Yi Junqing gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. Ju Chen didn't understand and couldn't help but start trembling. You did very well. This was this consort's negligence. This consort didn't think that An Bingshan would swap out the pills so quickly. Thankfully, you're smart and know how to be flexible. Yarrow Moen nodded in approval as a sharp light flashed through her eyes. This humble daoist thanks your highness for your praise. However, after this incident, even if Bingshan doesn't swap out the ingredients, he'll destroy those pills. At that time, wouldn't it be even harder for us to find evidence against him? Asked Zhu Chen worriedly. That won't happen. Yin Shui, give it to him. Yarrow Moen's red lips moved slightly with a faint smile. At the side, Yin Shui had already passed the paper bag to Zhu Chen. This is the raw material for the medicine, asked Zhu Chen in shock after taking a sniff. This consort knows of your abilities. We can have as much evidence as Bingshan throughout, right? Yarrow Moen looked towards Zhu Chen meaningfully. This humble daoist understand. Don't worry, your highness, this humble daoist knows what to do. Yarrow Moen didn't see a trace of doubt on Zhu Chen's face. This consort knows that refining those pills will cause poison. Aren't you afraid? Yarrow Moen looked towards Zhu Chen suspiciously. Since Zhu Chen chose to enter the palace, he didn't plan on leaving alive. Zhu Chen's submissive expression changed to one of extreme determination. Why? Yarrow Moen knew what Zhu Chen was thinking the best, but she still asked. If she wanted to keep Zhu Chen for her own use, the first thing she had to do was resolve the enmity between him and Yi Junqing. To get revenge for the second prince, Zhu Chen wasn't afraid to say something disrespectful. Even though His Majesty had ordered the second prince to be killed that day, the Empress had been benevolent and had left a path of retreat for the second prince. He hated that Bingshan had secretly sent people to ambush the second prince in order to claim credit, which was why the second prince had been shot to death. A loyal subject would not serve two masters. Zhu Chen had been struggling at death's door and hiding in Clearwind Monastery because he wanted to find a chance to take revenge for the second prince. Zhu Chen knows that he doesn't have the ability to kill His Majesty, but Zhu Chen definitely can't let that despicable Bingshan go. Zhu Chen promises that as long as Bingshan dies, Zhu Chen will allow the esteemed prince to punish me however he wants, and I won't have any regrets in death. Zhu Chen's words stunned Yi Junqing. What did you say? Back then, Mo Xin had intentionally let second imperial brother go? Yi Junqing abruptly stood up and grabbed Zhu Chen with both hands as his eyes shone brilliantly. He had always thought that Mo Xin was willing to do anything for Yi Hongyi, so there were some things that he hid in his heart and didn't say. How could Zhu Chen dare to deceive your highness and the esteemed prince? Back then, Empress Yarrow secretly sent someone to pass on a message to Zhu Chen, but unfortunately, the plans of man are no match for the plans of the heavens. The second prince is unlucky, but Zhu Chen still remembers Empress Yarrow's kindness. Tears welled up in Zhu Chen's eyes and his voice was choked with emotion. So that's how it is. It's been hard on Mo Xin. Yi Junqing let go of Zhu Chen dejectedly and stumbled back into the chair. His heart felt like it had been tossed into a field of thorns and it was bleeding profusely. He should have known that a woman like Mo Xin wouldn't do such a vicious and merciless thing. There's no need to refine this medicine. I'll think of another way to deal with the physical evidence. Recalling the past, although she wanted to save Yi Mohan, she couldn't save his life in the end. Your Highness, there's no need to be like this. Zhu Chen naturally has a way to refine the antidote, said Zhu Chen confidently as he looked towards Yarrow Moen gratefully. Really? If that's the case, you can save a few more lives. Yin Shui, send him back. Yarrow Moen nodded approvingly. Just as Yin Shui was about to leave with Zhu Chen, Yarrow Moen added. Remember this consort's words. If there's a flower to be plucked, then pluck it. This is one of the rewards this consort is giving you. Yarrow Moen stopped talking and Zhu Chen's face turned completely red. Once Zhu Chen left, Yarrow Moen turned to look towards Yi Junqing with a hint of sorrow in her eyes. She originally didn't want Zhu Chen to bring up the past again, but only if Yi Junqing understood the reason why by Zhu Chen was still alive would he feel less resentful towards this person. Who could guarantee that this Zhu Chen wouldn't become Yi Junqing's left and right arms in the future? Your Highness, aren't you moved? I never expected that the woman you love would actually have a heart of glazed glass, said Yarrow Moen as she looked towards Yi Junqing teasingly. Mo Xin has always had a heart of glazed glass, unlike a certain person. Yi Junqing put away the sorrow in his eyes and snorted coldly. Oh, Then what should Moan do to make Prince feel that Moan is also a kind person? Yarrow Moan rested her chin on one hand as she looked towards Yi Junqing with interest. If you're willing to return the Flame Soul Sword to this prince, Moan suddenly feels like being a good person isn't Moan's goal. It's getting late, Moan needs to rest. Prince, please do as you wish. Yarrow Moan coughed lightly, then got up to head towards the bedroom. You're leaving just like that? Then what about this prince's Flame Soul Sword? Yi Junqing hurriedly got up and asked loudly. That's not Prince's Flame Soul Sword, it's Moan's. Prince, please pay attention to your wording. Yarrow Moan looked back and pursed her lips. That smile was so charming that it caused all the beauties and beauties to lose their color. Yi Junqing couldn't help but stand there in a daze. It wasn't until the door was shut that he came back to his senses. Her heart's too black, muttered Yi Junqing hatefully before turning to leave helplessly. When she saw Mingyu again, Yarrow Moan abruptly got up and her eyes misted up. She saw that Mingyu's face was ashen, her hands were withered, and her eyes were sunken in. She was clearly terminally ill. This servant Mingyu kowtows in salute to your Imperial Highness. When Yarrow Moan saw that Mingyu was about to kneel, she immediately walked up and personally helped Mingyu to the table. Yin Shui, bring the medicine over. As Yarrow Moan urged, Yin Shui had already handed the antidote that Zhu Chen had refined last night to Yarrow Moan. Your Imperial Highness. Mingyu was just about to speak when Yarrow Moan stopped her. Eat this first. As Yarrow Moan spoke, she placed the pill in Mingyu's mouth, then personally poured a cup of water for her to drink. This servant thanks your Imperial Highness, but Mingyu knows very well that her body probably doesn't have many days left to live. Mingyu heard about what happened that day. This servant was incompetent and didn't notice that An Bingshan had secretly swapped out the pills, causing your Highness's plan to fail. This servant deserves to die. Mingyu's eyes overflowed with tears as she choked with sobs. Misfortune may turn out to be a blessing in disguise. This consort promised you that you would definitely see An Bingshan's fate with your own eyes, vowed Yarrow Moan. Master, look. At the side, Yin Shui was astonished by Mingyu's transformation. Go get the copper mirror. Yarrow Moan's cherry lips curved into a smile as her eyes sparkled. When Mingyu saw that her face was as radiant as before in the copper mirror, she was so happy that she couldn't hold back her tears. This servant kowtows in thanks for your Imperial Highness's grace. At this moment, Mingyu's cheeks were rosy and her eyes were spirited. Even her withered hands were glowing. It was clear just how miraculous the antidote that Zhu Chen had refined was. Stand up and speak. Yin Shui, give the antidote to Mingyu, ordered Yarrow Moan. Your Imperial Highness, this antidote? Mingyu looked towards Yarrow Moan in confusion. Chapter 243. The time for you to take revenge has come. Once you return, distribute these antidotes to the poisoned palace maids. Afterwards, tell An Bingshan that there are no problems with his prescription and dosage. Do you understand this consort's meaning? Said Yarrow Moan solemnly, her eyes bright. Your Highness means that we should continue to use this method to refine medicine. Because we've taken the antidote, nothing will happen to us. As for An Bingshan, he often goes to the pill refining room, so your Highness is wise, exclaimed Mingyu excitedly. Giving him a taste of his own medicine. The heavens aren't fated to let An Bingshan die so easily. This consort is just following the will of the heavens. Yarrow Moan smiled lightly. Just as Yarrow Moan expected, just as An Bingshan was about to secretly execute all the palace maids in the pill refining room, he discovered that the faces of the palace maids in the pill refining room suddenly glowed and they even seemed to have become much younger. Mingyu, what exactly is going on? An Bingshan called Mingyu over and looked towards the busy palace maids in confusion. Replying Unicorn, this servant doesn't know either. When I woke up, this servant was already like this. This servant is guessing that the medicine you refined this time must have taken effect. Although this servant and the others all showed signs of weakening, that might just be a transition. Now, when this servant looks in the mirror, this servant feels like I've become 7 or 8 years younger, reported Mingyu excitedly with bright eyes. Transition? Could it be that the prescription is real? And Bingshan was lost in thought and didn't notice the coldness hidden in Mingyu's eyes at all. If Unicorn is fine, this servant is in a hurry to refine medicine. Oh right, do we need to change the dosage of this batch of medicine? Asked Mingyu casually. For now. Don't change it for now. Although An Bingshan had his doubts, he couldn't deny the truth in front of him. Hearing this, Mingyu accepted the order. The moment he bowed and retreated, the corners of his lips curled up into a faint smile. In the following 2 days, An Bingshan changed his usual habits and often personally refined medicine. Sometimes, he would even taste the medicine with his mouth. One day, after An Bingshan confirmed that the pills he refined were no different from the previous batch, he actually put one of them into his mouth. In that instant, Mingyu was so happy that tears welled up in her eyes. Inside Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moen was looking at the beautiful phoenix clothes on the table, her heart filled with complicated feelings. The miscellaneous household has received His Imperial Majesty's verbal decree. The Empress conferring decree has already been issued for many days. Yesterday, the Ministry of Rites set the date of the Empress conferring ceremony on the 7th of next month. These are the phoenix robes sent over by the Department of Clothing. Your Highness can try them on first. If there's anything you're not satisfied with, send them back to the Department of Clothing and have them change them according to your Highness's wishes. Cough, 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 cough. And Bingshan respectfully reported. What beautiful clothes. Yarrow Mo Wn happily walked to the side of the table and held up the phoenix robe with both hands. When her fingers touched the fabric, it was as if several thousand needles were stabbing into her palm. What a familiar double-sided Su embroidery technique. In the entire imperial palace, only the Empress was fit to use this kind of embroidery. What a noble symbol. What a painful memory. Empress of Great Chu, this title that she detested from the bottom of her heart, had now fallen onto her head. Is this the will of the heavens? At the time, she had thought that it was the will of the heavens that she and Yi Junqing had missed each other, and that it was also the will of the heavens that she got together with Yi Hongyi. But what did the will of the heavens give her? This time, she was going to defy the will of the heavens. She was going to personally pave every brick and tile of her path. No one could make a fork in her path. The embroidery pattern on this phoenix robe was personally chosen by His Majesty for your Highness. Cough cough. And Bingshan couldn't help but cough. Are you all right? Tingyu, hurry and massage Unicorn's back. In the past, when Wn coughed, Mother would always do this. It's very effective. Yarrow Mo Wn looked towards An Bingshan worriedly as she gave this order. This old servant is fine. Your Highness is too kind. It's better to let Tingyu help your Highness try on the robe. This old servant will take his leave. An Bingshan respectfully turned around and walked out of Guan Osprey Palace in a somewhat disorderly manner. The moment An Bingshan left, Yi Junqing suddenly walked in through the palace doors. This prince had thought that the Empress bestowal ceremony would be spared. As he looked at the phoenix robe on the table, Yi Junqing's chest felt like it was completely blocked by a ball of cotton wool. That indescribable stifling feeling made Yi Junqing very irritated. Moen also hopes that it's spared, but what to do? His Majesty can't bear to wrong Moen. Yarrow Mo Wn threw away the phoenix robe in her hands in a self-mocking manner and ordered Tingyu to bring it into the inner chambers. Since His Majesty dotes on you so much, you don't need to find any other way out, Yi Junqing said sourly as he pulled Fluffy off the chaise lounge and sat down on it himself. His Majesty dotes on Moen is His Majesty's business. What does it have to do with Moen? Prince should have known that Moen doesn't care for any imperial favor. Yarrow Mo Wn bent over to pick up Fluffy, who could still get shot even while lying down, and patted Fluffy's head comfortingly. Then what do you care for? Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Mo Wan with a serious expression. Of course I care for you, replied Yarrow Mo Wan solemnly. In return, Yi Junqing rolled his eyes meaningfully. Ahem. Earlier, this prince saw that An Bingshan looked like he was drunk. It seems that your plan succeeded. Yi Junqing forcefully suppressed the throbbing in his heart and changed the topic. Moen said that I care for Prince earlier, But why didn't Prince show any reaction at all? You should know that there aren't many things in this world that Moan cares for. Yarrow Mo Wn knew that Yi Junqing was intentionally changing the topic, so she deliberately brought it back. This prince is talking about serious matters. When Yi Junqing saw Yarrow Mo Wn walk over, he deliberately took a few steps back. Moan is also talking about serious matters. Yarrow Mo Wn blinked her bright and clear eyes as she slowly walked to Yi Junqing's side. Yarrow Mo Wn. When he felt Yarrow Mo Wn sit down next to him, Yi Junqing felt the fire of impatience burn in his heart. He immediately shouted harshly to hide the anxiety in his heart. I'm here. Is something the matter? The more embarrassed Yi Junqing was, the happier Yarrow Mo Wn was. Yarrow Mo Wn suddenly felt that teasing Fluffy wasn't as enjoyable as teasing Yi Junqing. It's nothing, this prince is leaving. When Yi Junqing smelled the unique and elegant fragrance on Yarrow Mo Wan's body, he jumped up from the chaise lounge. The day Ju Chen finishes refining the pill will be the day and Bingshan dies, said Yarrow Mo Wn indifferently as she reached out to stroke Fluffy. Yi Junqing stood silently at the palace doors for a long time before he finally turned around. Thanks for this time. In Yi Junqing's opinion, Yarrow Mo Wn dealing with An Bingshan was completely helping him. What? Moan didn't hear clearly. May Prince say it again? Yarrow Mo Wn pretended to frown as she looked towards Yi Junqing. Give me back my flame soul sword. Yi Junqing shouted in embarrassment. Oh, there's no need to thank me. Yarrow Mo Wan nodded earnestly. Yi Junqing immediately rubbed his forehead as his lips twitched. That night, the autumn wind was slightly chilly, causing the leaves to rustle. The moonlight shone through the leaves, creating a mottled scene. In the room of the Departure Realm courtyard, two naked bodies were entangled with each other. Neither was willing to be the first to give up. Both of them were desperately venting. The bed creaked, as if it would collapse in the next second. The embroidered tent was swayed like the waves on the sea, each wave higher than the last. The messy daoist robes on the floor were charming and gentle, filling the room with the light of spring. Daoist priest has such a good cultivation. Yarrow Sulwan grabbed Ju Chen's back with both hands, leaving long red marks. This humble daoist is ashamed. Your Highness's cultivation is definitely above this humble daoist's. Ju Chen enjoyed the reward Yarrow Mo Wn had given him to his heart's content. Only when his body no longer had any strength did he climb down from Yarrow Sulwan's body in satisfaction. He faced the sky and panted heavily. Because she was Yi Hongyi's woman, Ju Chen's actions were especially stimulating. Since he didn't have the ability to kill Yi Hongyi, he just wanted to make him wear the hat even higher. Chapter 244. Sulwan is truly overwhelmed by daoist priest's praise. Yarrow Sulwan flipped over and lay on Ju Chen's chest. Her jade fingers brushed across the hairs on Ju Chen's forehead. Her body was smooth and soft as if it didn't have any bones. At this moment, Ju Chen really hated the fact that he wasn't at Clearwind Monastery. Otherwise, he would definitely let those little disciples who ate vegetables all year round have a taste of fresh meat. Everything Ju Chen says comes from the bottom of my heart. There is not a single lie in my words, Ju Chen swore as he pointed to the sky. Sulwan believes, and Sulwan also believes, that daoist priest will definitely help this consort sneak this pill into His Majesty's teacup. As Yarrow Sulwan spoke, she took out a pill the size of a fingernail from under her pillow and placed it in Ju Chen's hand. What is this? Ju Chen looked suspiciously at the pill in his hand. He placed it under his nose and sniffed it a few times. He immediately recognized that it was a lethal poison. There's no need to be so nervous, daoist priest. It's just a knockout drug that makes people unconscious for 4 to 5 days. Because of White Brow's shadow, in Yarrow Sulwan's eyes, all Taoists were swindlers who only knew how to swindle people. Thus, from the very beginning, Yarrow Sulwan had never placed Ju Chen in her eyes. Knockout drug. Why did Guifei drug His Majesty? When he saw that Yarrow Sulwan had no one in her eyes, Ju Chen decided to beat her at her own game. He immediately crawled up and knelt in the corner of the bed, trembling. His body would occasionally tremble a few times to show how scared he was. Look at how scared Daoist priest is. Isn't Sulwan doing this for Daoist priest's own good? Yarrow Sulwan lazily tossed aside the blankets and got off the bed. Her smooth body was completely revealed to Ju Chen. For this humble Daoist's own good. Ju Chen swallowed, then shivered as he crawled to the side of the bed. He looked towards Yarrow Sulwan suspiciously. Although Ben Gong has only seen Daoist priest a few times, Ben Gong remembers that Daoist priest used to be second prince's person. Now that Daoist priest is no longer obediently staying at Clear Wind Temple and has chosen to risk death to enter the palace, it's obvious what his goal is. Yarrow Sulwan sat elegantly on a chair and held a jade comb in her hand as she spoke slowly. Then what is this humble Daoist's goal? Ju Chen probed. Of course I want to stand out. In this world, who doesn't want to live a grand and exciting life? If it was Ben Gong, I also wouldn't be willing to stay in such a desolate place for the rest of my life. Yarrow Sulwan believed herself to be infallible. Your Imperial Highness is wise. Since your Imperial Highness understands Ju Chen's intentions, then you should know that Ju Chen will have to rely on His Majesty for the rest of his life. I'm afraid I won't be able to help your Imperial Highness much this time. Ju Chen picked up the Daoist robe and draped it over his body. He walked over to Yarrow Sulwan with small steps and placed the pill on the table. A pill the size of a fingernail. Does Yarrow Sulwan think that His Majesty is blind? This was what Ju Chen thought. Daoist priest, don't be in such a hurry to refuse. Let Sulwan finish speaking. There's something Daoist priest might not know. Even if Daoist priest has been given the title of state preceptor, wanting to beat His Majesty's and Bingshan is as difficult as ascending to the heavens, said Yarrow Sulwan indifferently as she carefully combed her hair into a flying bun. And Bingshan is nothing more than a eunuch. This humble Daoist still has this confidence, said Ju Chen as he slowly retreated to the side. There's something Daoist priest definitely doesn't know. Before that An Bingshan entered the palace, he was also a Daoist priest. Who knows where he got his hands on a recipe for immortality? These past few years, he's been secretly refining pills for His Majesty. Think about it, with such a good job in his hands, would His Majesty mistreat him? Yarrow Sulwan abruptly turned around and looked towards Ju Chen with a serious expression. He knows how to refine pills. Ju Chen pretended to be surprised. So His Majesty will only abandon him and take you if there's a problem with the pills he refines. Yarrow Sulwan saw that Ju Chen was moved and tried even harder to persuade him. But how can there be a problem with the pills he refines? Ju Chen furrowed his brows in thought. Daoist priest looks intelligent, but why are you so clueless? As long as you give this consort's pills to His Majesty, if something happens to His Majesty's body, he'll naturally blame An Bingshan. Daoist priest can't understand such a simple logic. Yarrow Sulwan was getting a little anxious. So that's how it is. Then this humble Daoist really has to thank noble consort Your Highness, said Ju Chen in realization. He clasped his hands in front of his chest and bowed deeply towards Yarrow Sulwan. What are you thanking me for? This consort is only doing this so that you can sit firmly on the throne of state preceptor. At that time, you and this consort will be able to. Yarrow Sulwan got up and walked over to Ju Chen. She lifted Ju Chen's chin with a finger as a seductive light shone in her eyes. When Ju Chen repeated Yarrow Sulwan's words to Yarrow Moen couldn't help but sigh. Which quack doctor made this pill for second older sister? Yarrow Moen was extremely speechless when she saw that the pill hadn't melted even after being submerged in the water for a long time. Ahem. This humble Daoist feels that the crux of the problem lies in the fact that noble consort Li wants to kill His Majesty, not this pill. Ju Chen clearly hadn't expected that this would be the response he'd gotten after spending so much effort to explain. What's so strange about that? There's more than one person in the Imperial Palace who wants to kill His Majesty. Why did you tell this consort? Actually, you could have just sneaked this pill into His Majesty's cup and found an excuse to lead the trail back to Pure Flower's palace. Given your intellect, that wouldn't have been difficult. Yarrow Moen lifted her eyes indifferently and looked towards Ju Chen meaningfully. Since Ju Chen promised Your Highness not to touch His Majesty in the slightest, then I wouldn't act on my own. From start to finish, Ju Chen's target has only been in Bingshan. Ju Chen knew that Yarrow Moen was testing him, so he immediately expressed his stance. "MN, this consort believes you. Have you finished refining the pill this consort had you refine?" Yarrow Moen returned to the main topic. She'd let An Bingshan roam free and unfettered for so long, so it was time to send him to the next world. Ju Chen has already brought it. Please take a look, Your Highness. As Ju Chen spoke, he took out a dozen or so translucent white pills and carefully placed them on the table. "MN, you've done well. This consort wants to ask you, what are your plans after this is done?" Yarrow Moen had taken a liking to Ju Chen. He had a steady mind and was meticulous in his actions. He was a promising talent. "If I survive, I'll return to Clearwind Monastery," replied Ju Chen honestly. "If this consort has a good place to go, would you be willing?" Yarrow Moen lifted her brows as she looked towards Ju Chen. When Ju Chen heard this, he abruptly looked up and a trace of darkness flashed through his eyes. "Ju Chen understands Your Highness's intentions. As long as An Bingshan dies, Ju Chen will naturally. Do you think this consort would take your life?" asked Yarrow Moen with a faint smile. "Isn't that so?" Ju Chen knew very well what the words good place meant. "Forget it, you'll know when the time comes. Withdraw. Dealing with An Bingshan will happen in the next 2 days. You should make some preparations," said Yarrow Moen indifferently. "Ju Chen understands, but what about noble consort Li?" Ju Chen suddenly recalled his original intentions for coming here. "Leave her alone for now. It wouldn't be too late to tease her when this consort has the time." Yarrow Moen's gaze was cold and the smile on her lips caused Ju Chen to shiver. The next day at breakfast, Yi Junqing held his bowl and chopsticks as he sat hesitantly on a chair. From time to time, he would look towards Yarrow Moen. "If Prince has something to say, just say it. It's easy for others to misunderstand if you act like this. It makes it seem like Moen is so unkind that Prince has to watch her expression when eating." As Yarrow Moen spoke, she placed a piece of fish in Yi Junqing's bowl. "This prince saw Yarrow Sulwan go to Ju Chen's room the night before yesterday." Yi Junqing seemed to be implying something. "So what?" Yarrow Moen objected. "She actually seduced Ju Chen." Yi Junqing put down his bowl and chopsticks as he rebuked angrily. Prince followed her to take a look. Yarrow Moen's eyes widened as she looked towards Yi Junqing. This prince isn't that despicable. However, other than that kind of thing, there's nothing else. This prince won't just sit and watch," said Yi Junqing angrily. "Prince, there's no need to make such a big fuss over nothing. It's not the first time Yarrow Sulwan has done something like this. You weren't this angry even when she was fooling around with Yi Zixiao back then." Yarrow Moen knew that the fact that Yarrow Sulwan had caused Morshin's death had always been a thorn in Yi Junqing's heart. If Yarrow Sulwan didn't die, there was no way Yi Junqing would let it go. Chapter 245. I can do it once or twice, but I can't do it a third or fourth time. No matter what, this prince has decided to slaughter that lowly woman tonight. Yi Junqing felt uncomfortable whenever he saw that Yarrow Sulwan was still alive and unfettered. Prince hates Yarrow Sulwan, but Moen also hates her. The reason Moen has allowed her to live until now, aside from the testimony in her hands, is because Moen plans to announce eldest sister's death to the world in the future. If Yarrow Sulwan dies, then there will be no witnesses. Does Prince believe that one day, Moen will have the person who harmed eldest sister kowtow in front of eldest sister's tomb to admit their guilt and then commit suicide? Yarrow Moen's deep eyes flickered with a cold light. Her words seemed to prick at the blood in Yi Junqing's heart. As expected of Morshin's younger sister. This prince didn't misjudge you. Yi Junqing forced his tears back and nodded firmly. So Prince approves of Moen's actions? Yarrow Moen withdrew the coldness in her eyes and looked towards Yi Junqing in confusion. Of course. You've thought things through more thoroughly than this prince. That's right, Morshin died a miserable death. The person who harmed her shouldn't die so easily. Yi Junqing relaxed and temporarily set aside his killing intent towards Yarrow Sulwan. All right, Prince, hurry and eat. After eating, help Moen do something. From this moment onwards, Yarrow Moen knew that she could have Yi Junqing do anything he wanted her to. I'm not eating anymore. The matter is more important. What is it? Yi Junqing immediately got up and looked towards Yarrow Moen passionately. Moen's words are like chicken blood. Yarrow Moen couldn't help but sigh when she saw Yi Junqing like this. When Yi Junqing heard this, he froze in place. At noon, Yi Hongyi had wanted to go visit Yarrow Moen in Guan Osprey Palace, but when he reached the Imperial Garden, he suddenly heard the sound of a quarrel. What happened? Yi Hongyi's expression was dark as he asked sternly. This old servant will send someone to take a look right now. And Bingshan immediately turned around and was about to order the little eunuch behind him to go when Yi Hongyi stopped him. Forget it, I will go personally. Ever since Zhu Chen verified An Bingshan's pill, Yi Hongyi became even more convinced that he would take the pill on time every day. In the past 2 days, whenever he thought of Yarrow Moen, his body would immediately react. However, this reaction only lasted for a few minutes before disappearing without a trace. Under these circumstances, he really shouldn't have gone to Guan Osprey Palace. And Bingshan's condition wasn't much better than Yi Hongyi's. Although he didn't have any feelings towards the matters between men and women, ever since he took the medicinal pill, An Bingshan felt his limbs go weak and his head go dizzy. Sometimes, 2 masters would appear in front of him. In front of the well, Yi Junxiao gripped the young eunuch's collar, his clear eyes cold like frost. You dare to stop this prince? Roared Yi Junqing angrily. As he spoke, he abruptly pushed the young eunuch aside and strode towards the dry well. Prince, you can't, there's nothing here. What is Prince trying to do? The young eunuch panicked and hugged Yi Junqing's leg as he begged with a bitter expression. What this king wants to do is none of your business. Out of the way. Yi Junqing kicked the young eunuch aside. Just as he was about to walk away, he suddenly heard an icy voice from behind him. What are you guys doing here? When Yi Junqing heard this, he turned around. When he saw that it was Yi Hongyi, he immediately cupped his hands in greeting. This subject younger brother kowtows in salute to your majesty. When the young eunuch saw Yi Hongyi appear, he broke out in a cold sweat. He was already kneeling to the side in disregard of the pain as he trembled uncontrollably. Junqing, what are you doing here? Yi Hongyi glanced at the young eunuch before turning to look at Yi Junqing. Replying, Your Majesty, this subject younger brother saw this servant throw something into the well earlier and wanted to take a look out of curiosity. I didn't expect that this servant would stubbornly stop me. This subject younger brother felt that something was off and started arguing with him. I didn't want to disturb Your Majesty, so please forgive me, said Yi Junqing truthfully. Oh! What did you throw into the well? Yi Hongyi turned to look towards the young eunuch. The young eunuch had buried his head between his legs and was trembling uncontrollably. When the young eunuch didn't say anything, An Bingshan immediately walked forward. Damned servant, His Majesty is asking you a question. An Bingshan deliberately moved closer to the young eunuch. Only then did he see that the person kneeling on the ground was none other than his trusted aide, Xiao Dunzi. Replying, Your Majesty, this servant didn't throw anything. As Xiao Dunzi spoke, he looked towards An Bingshan with pleading eyes. Only now did An Bingshan realize the severity of the situation. Last night, he had been itching to do something and tortured a palace maid to death. He had originally wanted to hand her over to Xiao Dunzi to deal with, but now that he thought about it, Xiao Dunzi must have felt that it was too far, so he decided to just throw the palace maid into the well. Nonsense. This prince saw it with his own eyes, how could it be fake? Yi Junqing immediately walked forward and kicked Xiao Dunzi in the chest. Junqing, there's no need to be so angry. Jun will have someone go down the well and take a look. If there really is something shameful inside, Jun will just bestow death upon him. Yi Hongyi felt dispirited and even standing was a bit strenuous. Your Majesty, leave this matter to this old servant. Why don't you go back and rest? An Bingshan walked over to Yi Hongyi guiltily. That's fine. Just as Yi Hongyi was about to turn around, he suddenly smelled a familiar scent. He immediately turned around with a sharp gaze. The pill refinement room was sealed, so it was impossible for a scent to escape. Even if it did, it wouldn't have traveled this far. Although Yi Hongyi was dispirited, His mind was still very sharp. This scent was clearly the scent of the pills he took every day. Your Majesty. And Bingshan didn't understand and looked towards his master in confusion. Junqing, you don't have to worry about such a small matter. Leave it to these servants to deal with. We suddenly remembered that there are important memorials that haven't been approved yet. Help us take all of the memorials on the dragon table to Guan Osprey Palace. Our body, said Yi Hongyi in a weak voice. But, all right, this younger brother will go now. Yi Hongyi glanced at the dried well awkwardly before turning to leave. The moment Yi Junqing left, Yi Hongyi's gaze turned cold and he turned to order the guards to check the well. Your Majesty, should this old servant send you back to Central Dragon Palace? And Bingshan was used to this scent, so he didn't notice anything. He just wanted to send Yi Hongyi away as soon as possible, but when he saw Yi Hongyi's cold gaze, he couldn't help but fall silent. And Bingshan realized that His Majesty more or less knew about his situation. Perhaps His Majesty had sent Yi Junqing away to save him some face. Just as Bingshan was pondering this, he saw the guards pull out a corpse from the well. Reporting to Your Majesty, there are at least 30 more corpses like this in the well. Yi Hongyi's gaze instantly turned cold. Bring them all up. Yi Hongyi roared angrily as he stared at the palace maid's corpse. What's going on? The moment Bingshan saw the woman's corpse, he felt all the blood in his body freeze and he swallowed hard. He walked forward in panic. The palace maid in front of him was clearly the one he had secretly shipped out of the imperial palace to test medicine behind Yi Hongyi's back. How did she end up here? Your Majesty. And Bingshan looked towards Yi Hongyi in panic. Come. Go get the state preceptor. Yi Hongyi roared angrily, his dark eyes filled with coldness. At this time, the guards had already brought up 30 female corpses from the bottom of the well. And Bingshan's legs couldn't help but tremble as he looked at the corpses on the ground. The horsetail whisk in his hands also fluttered in the wind. All of the corpses had ashen complexions, sunken eyes, and were as thin as sticks. All of them were signs of being poisoned. Chapter 246. Your Majesty, this matter. And Bingshan staggered back to Yi Hongyi's side. He really wanted to explain that even though those palace maids had died from concocting pills, there was nothing wrong with the pills. However, the moment he opened his mouth, Yi Hongyi stopped him. We'll talk after Imperial Preceptor arrives. Yi Hongyi didn't even look at Bingshan. His eyes were fixed on the corpses. After about 5 minutes, Zhu Chen arrived at the Imperial Garden under the guidance of the guards. This humble daoist Zhu Chen kowtows in salute to Your Majesty. Zhu Chen respectfully bowed and glanced at Bingshan out of the corner of his eyes. When their eyes met, Bingshan instantly understood and glared at Zhu Chen. Imperial Preceptor, please rise. Help us investigate the cause of death of these palace maids. The low voice was extremely cold. Zhu Chen didn't dare tarry and immediately turned to walk towards the palace maids' corpses. Next to Yi Hongyi, Bingshan's eyes were bloodshot. He was annoyed that he hadn't gotten rid of Zhu Chen earlier. Given the current situation, he probably wouldn't be able to escape. Reporting to Your Majesty, this humble daoist needs to perform an autopsy to find the truth. Zhu Chen walked in front of Yi Hongyi with a serious expression. Speechless, Yi Hongyi personally pulled out the knife and handed it to Zhu Chen. To Bingshan, time was long and hard to endure. Especially when he saw Zhu Chen remove a pill from a palace maid's stomach, Bingshan knew that he was done for this time. Right now, all he could do was preserve his old life. As long as he could preserve his life, he would have a way to reverse the situation. Your Majesty, this humble daoist believes that these palace maids all died from this pill. Zhu Chen wiped a pill clean and presented it to Yi Hongyi with one hand. Daoist priest believes that this pill is different from the one we showed Daoist priest a few days ago. Yi Hongyi's voice was as cold as ice as he clenched his fists behind his back. In this humble daoist's humble opinion, the ingredients for both pills are the same. The only difference is the dosage. You should know that there can't be the slightest mistake in concocting this type of pill. If the dosage isn't correct, the former is a lifespan extension recipe while the latter is a life-locking poison. Ju Chen's expression was solemn as he spoke each word firmly. In Imperial Preceptor's opinion, can the person who can refine the life-extending prescription also refine the life-sealing poison? Yi Hongyi's voice grew colder and colder. To the side, and Bingshan's body was trembling uncontrollably. At this moment, a single word from Ju Chen would be enough to throw him into a bottomless abyss. Unless it's intentional. Ju Chen's simple and direct reply infuriated Yi Hongyi. Guards. Taken Bingshan to Central Dragon Palace. State Preceptor, please speak further. The rest of you stay. Bring the corpses out of the Imperial Palace and burn them, roared Yi Hongyi angrily. Then, he stomped towards Central Dragon Palace. Once everyone left, Yi Junqing and Yarrow Moen walked out of the shadows. We haven't even confirmed that the pills in the alchemy room are poisonous, yet the Emperor is already so angry. Yi Junqing couldn't help but shake his head, but he was very happy inside. The angrier His Majesty was, the more miserable and Bingshan's death would be. Anyone who consumes this elixir of immortality cherishes their lives. I'd like to ask, if someone who desires to live so much found out that the things they eat every day are very likely life-sealing poisons, how would they react? Yarrow Moen smiled faintly. Fortunately, Yi Hongyi hadn't been poisoned too deeply. If he had died just like that, she would have regretted it. That's right, how did you get the pills into the stomachs of those corpses? Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moen curiously. How hard could it be? I just cut them open, stuffed them in, and sewed them back up, replied Yarrow Moen concisely. No way, aren't you afraid that His Majesty will find an imperial physician to examine the corpses? Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moen in shock. Are you joking? If this kind of thing could be done in public, why would His Majesty need to send you away? You also saw that if this wasn't the Imperial Palace, His Majesty would immediately destroy those corpses. Let's go. Moen invites Prince to taste some tea. Yin Shui will return to Guan Osprey Palace with the good news soon. Yarrow Moen smiled lightly as she walked. As he watched Yarrow Moen's graceful figure leave, Yi Junqing sighed inwardly. Right now, Yarrow Moen's every movement was extremely similar to Morshin's. Inside Central Dragon Palace, Yi Hongyi ordered someone to open the secret door and An Bingshan was pushed into the pill refining room. This servant kowtows in salute to your majesty. The moment Ming Yu and the others saw Yi Hongyi, they all knelt on the ground in fear and trepidation. Ever since they had entered the pill refining room, they had never seen His Majesty step foot in here. In this moment, Ming Yu knew that the day she had been waiting for had finally arrived. Your Majesty, please understand. Even if this old servant had 100 times more guts, I wouldn't dare give your Majesty poisoned pills. This old servant swears that those palace maids definitely didn't die from the pills. It was Ju Chen. Ju Chen harbors hatred towards this old servant. He's wanted this old servant dead for a long time now. Your Majesty, this old servant has served you wholeheartedly all these years. Tears streamed down An Bingshan's face as he sobbed silently. However, Yi Hongyi remained unmoved. You. Bring over the pills you've refined these past few days. Yi Hongyi casually pointed at Ming Yu's head. This servant obeys. Ming Yu inwardly rejoiced and immediately turned around to bring the jade box containing the pills to Yi Hongyi. State Preceptor, help us examine these pills. Are there any abnormalities? Yi Hongyi ignored An Bingshan's words and looked straight at Ju Chen. Ju Chen saluted with one hand, then walked in front of Ming Yu. He picked up a pill and sniffed it. Your Majesty, this pill is the same as the one in the palace maids' corpses. After taking it, it will cause a person to become dispirited and listless. Moreover, it will accumulate in the stomach and won't dissolve, replied Ju Chen solemnly. You're slandering me. Your Majesty. This pill truly has the effect of prolonging life. Although it will cause a person to feel tired at first, after taking it to a certain extent, it will cause the person's face to glow and they will regain their youth. All the palace maids here can attest to this. Ming Yu, hurry and report this to His Majesty. Hurry and say it. An Bingshan struggled and roared as he urged Ming Yu. Unicorn, what are you saying? Ming Yu doesn't understand. Ming Yu looked towards An Bingshan with a blank expression. She felt indescribably carefree. How could you forget? Back then, you all showed symptoms of being poisoned, but then you suddenly came back to life. It's that matter, tell His Majesty. Reminded An Bingshan anxiously. Reporting to Your Majesty, this servant truly doesn't know what Unicorn is talking about. Ever since this servant arrived here, this servant has been refining pills according to the dosage Unicorn set. Nothing like what Unicorn said has happened. Your Majesty is wise. Ming Yu panicked at An Bingshan's words. She immediately knelt on the ground, tears welling up in her eyes. Ming Yu, you lowly servant. You all hurry and tell His Majesty that what this one said is true. An Bingshan hadn't expected that Ming Yu would lie through her teeth. Your Majesty, spare us. This servant has been refining pills here all this time and has never shown symptoms of being poisoned. Behind Ming Yu, the 20 or so palace maids all knelt on the ground and reported in fear. Your Majesty, this humble daoist thought that as long as we found a hamster to test the pills on, we would be able to tell if these pills are real or fake. At the side, Zhu Chen didn't miss this opportunity to speak up. How could there be a hamster in the imperial palace? She'll do it. Veins popped on Yi Hongyi's forehead. His eyes were cold as he pointed at the kneeling Ming Yu. Emperor! Ming Yu was so shocked that she really wanted to beg for mercy, but when she opened her mouth, she restrained herself. She knew very well that if she died from taking these pills, An Bingshan's fate would definitely be worse than she could imagine. Your Majesty, this humble daoist thought that it would be better to use a hamster or a cat or dog. These pills might not have immediate effects on a human, said Zhu Chen respectfully as he clasped his hands in front of his chest. Since that's the case, come, bring the animals in Pure Flower's palace over, shouted Yi Hongyi coldly. Chapter 247. When he finished speaking, Ming Yu reflexively looked towards Zhu Chen with a trace of gratitude in his eyes. Zhu Chen only nodded slightly, then turned his gaze towards An Bingshan, who had long since been paralyzed from fear. When he saw his former enemy get his just retribution, Zhu Chen finally felt relieved. He had struggled at death's door for so many years just for this day. After about the time it took to make a cup of tea, the guards brought in the vicious dog that Yarrow Sulwan had just gotten from outside the palace. The instant he saw the vicious dog, Zhu Chen inwardly swallowed. If it took one pill to poison someone to death, then this dog in front of him would probably need 3 pills to die. Fortunately, Yi Hongyi was currently in a fit of anger, so he didn't care too much. He immediately ordered Zhu Chen to test the medicine. Zhu Chen didn't hesitate. He casually took the golden box from the palace maid's hands and threw all the pills inside onto the ground. Even if it was poison, it was a poison that contained all the precious medicinal ingredients in the world. The evil dog sniffed and immediately stuck out its tongue to lick all the pills into its stomach. At this moment, everyone's gazes landed on the evil dog, especially An Bingshan. His narrowed eyes were wide open. Even though he knew that this was a trap that Zhu Chen had set up, he still hoped for a miracle. Woo! Zhu Chen watched as the evil dog struggled on the ground a few times before whimpering pitifully. A hint of amusement flashed through his eyes. The moment he took the golden box, he rubbed the poison he had prepared onto the pill. Impossible. Your Majesty, this is impossible. This old servant has been using these pills all this time, and isn't I still alive and well right now? This animal shouldn't have died. Your Majesty, don't be tricked by them. The moment the evil dog breathed its last, An Bingshan screamed. An Bingshan. Say that again. Yi Hongyi abruptly swung his sleeves, his sinister expression surging with anger. This old servant was afraid that something would happen to Your Majesty after using them, so I tested the medicine myself. Your Majesty, these pills aren't poisonous, they really aren't poisonous. If Your Majesty doesn't believe me, you can summon an imperial physician to examine this old servant. In his panic, An Bingshan revealed the secret of him secretly eating the pills. However, in a life and death situation, this matter seemed insignificant. All right. We will give you this chance. If the imperial physician is able to detect the composition of the medicinal pill in your body, then it will prove that you didn't deliberately plot to harm us. Otherwise. Yi Hongyi's eerie eyes suddenly narrowed. The viciousness in them seemed to want to kill Bingshan by 1,000 cuts. Everyone in the Central Dragon Palace had their eyes on the imperial physician. Reporting to your majesty, Unicorn has indeed shown symptoms of being poisoned. Fortunately, the poison isn't too deep. Once this official returns and prepares a prescription, within half a month, the poison in Unicorn's body will definitely be cured. Imperial physician Li withdrew his hand from Bingshan's wrist and stood up to respectfully report to Yi Hongyi. There's no need. You can leave, said Yi Hongyi solemnly. As a veteran of the palace, Imperial physician Li naturally understood that this matter was far from ordinary and quickly retreated from Central Dragon Palace. Your Majesty, this old servant is guilty. However, this old servant had never thought of harming your Majesty. Otherwise, this old servant would not have taken the pill despite knowing that it was poisonous. At this time, Bingshan could only pretend to be weak. If he continued to cling on to Ju Chen, he would definitely anger His Majesty, even if he had already cursed Ju Chen over 10,000 times in his heart. How dare a lowly person like you be mentioned in the same breath as us, shouted Yi Hongyi angrily. This old servant knows that he is guilty, but I beg your Majesty to spare this old servant's life for the sake of serving your Majesty wholeheartedly all these years. I beg your Majesty, begged Bingshan loudly as he prostrated himself on the ground. Guards, lock Bingshan in the secret room. Without our permission, no one is allowed to take a single step into the secret room, shouted Yi Hongyi coldly. When the guards heard this, they immediately dragged Bingshan out of Central Dragon Palace. Once Bingshan was dragged out, Yi Hongyi took a deep breath, then looked towards Ju Chen with a smile. I've let Daoist priest see a joke. It's all because of that worthless thing, Bingshan. He only knew a little, yet he dared to brag to us about refining some longevity pill. Now that he's seen Daoist priest, his true colors have been revealed. Yi Hongyi's tone was modest and his attitude respectful. His eyes shone brightly. Your Majesty is exaggerating, replied Ju Chen with a flick of his horsetail whisk. This kind of result wasn't what he had expected. In his opinion, Bingshan was definitely going to die. Not at all. Daoist priest is someone with true ability. Now, we have a presumptuous request. Would Daoist priest be able to agree to it? Asked Yi Hongyi expectantly as he raised his brows. Your Majesty, please feel free to tell us anything. This humble Daoist's goal in coming out of seclusion is to help your Majesty resolve your problems. Ju Chen's heart tightened slightly, but he didn't show it. We've thought about it. The pill refining room has been open for a long time, so it would be a pity to just close it like this. Fortunately, Daoist priest is also proficient in this method. If Daoist priest could help us share our worries, that would be for the best. Yi Hongyi looked towards Ju Chen meaningfully, his tone faintly cold. This humble Daoist is indebted to your Majesty's trust. This humble Daoist will definitely not let your Majesty down, said Ju Chen resolutely as he bowed. At this moment, Ju Chen knew very well that if he refused, the only result would be death. It was a great taboo for the ruler of a country to privately refine pills. Yi Hongyi definitely wouldn't give him a chance to spread the news. All right. Since that's the case, we'll give this pill refining room to Daoist priests. From today onwards, the Imperial Hospital, palace maids, and eunuchs can all be assigned by Daoist priests. Yi Hongyi nodded firmly, then allowed Ju Chen to leave Central Dragon Palace. That night, when Ju Chen appeared in Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moen and Yi Junqing were in the middle of a bet about the Flame Soul Sword. Remember what you said. If Ju Chen agrees to refine pills for your Majesty, then you have to return the Flame Soul Sword to this prince. Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moen with shining eyes. In Yi Junqing's opinion, if he still didn't get the Flame Soul Sword back, it was very likely that Yarrow Moen would sell it for money. In the past few days, every time he entered Guan Osprey Palace, he would see Yarrow Moen buried in a pile of account books, furiously calculating on her abacus and sighing from time to time about how poor she was. That's not right. What Moen means is that if Ju Chen has the intention to refine pills for your majesty, then Moen will return the Flame Soul Sword to Prince. If not, then the sword will be Moen's. To tell you the truth, Moen has been really poor lately. Yarrow Moen looked towards Yi Junqing with a pitiful expression, but Yi Junqing only rolled his eyes in response. Master, Ju Chen has been brought. Right at this time, Yin Shui landed and placed Ju Chen on the ground. Ju Chen, did you agree to refine pills for His Majesty? Before Yarrow Moen could speak, Yi Junqing spoke first with raised brows. This? Yes. Ju Chen didn't dare to hide it, nor could he hide it. Very good. Yi Junqing nodded in satisfaction, then looked towards Yarrow Moen. Yarrow Moen ignored him and walked towards Ju Chen. Ju Chen, this consort wants to ask you, what do you plan to do now? Yarrow Moen's voice was gentle as she looked towards Ju Chen. Ju Chen had no idea that if his answer wasn't what Yarrow Moen wanted, then his life would be over. Replying, Your Highness, Ju Chen doesn't want to and will not refine pills for His Majesty. Ju Chen's tone was firm. If you dare lie, the heavens will strike you with lightning. When Yi Junqing heard this, he immediately stood up and pointed at Ju Chen. He felt like his heart had just been sent to the clouds, only to be ruthlessly kicked back down. These are all Ju Chen's true thoughts. Although it was An Bingshan who caused the second prince to have nowhere to go, the instigator was Yi Hongyi. Ju Chen is loyal to his former master, so how could he possibly struggle at death's door under Yi Hongyi's hands? However, if Your Highness and Prince allow Ju Chen to stay in the palace, then Ju Chen will have no choice but to enter the pill refining room. However, Ju Chen will first say that the poison in the pills Ju Chen will refine will definitely not be any less than An Bingshan's. This consort won't allow you to commit regicide. This consort has already thought of a place to go, so are you willing to listen to this consort's arrangements? Yarrow Moen sighed inwardly in relief. Reality proved that she hadn't misjudged him. Chapter 248. If I don't personally see An Bingshan take his last breath, Ju Chen won't go anywhere. This is also what Your Highness promised Ju Chen back then. Ju Chen was neither servile nor overbearing. Don't worry, you're not the only one who wants An Bingshan dead. Tomorrow night, this consort will arrange for you to go see An Bingshan. However, before that, this consort hopes that you can think of a way to safely send the palace maids in the pill refining room out of the imperial palace. You should know what will happen to the maids in the pill refining room if they leave one day. Yarrow Moen looked towards Ju Chen solemnly as she waited for his reply. Your Highness, don't worry. Leave this to Ju Chen. Ju Chen nodded firmly. Once Ju Chen left, Yarrow Moen walked over to Yi Junqing with a faint smile. Prince, are you convinced of your loss now? Yi Junqing stood up angrily when he saw Yarrow Moen's vulgar smile. How much? Yi Junqing's eyes were like water as they sparkled brightly. 1,000,000 taels of gold. Yarrow Moen's smile grew even brighter. How much? Yi Junqing's eyes widened as he looked towards Yarrow Moen. 1,000,000 taels of gold, repeated Yarrow Moen calmly. If Your Highness the Empress can find the person who's willing to spend 1,000,000 taels of gold to buy the Flame Soul Sword, then please let this prince take a look. This prince has never seen a true idiot in this life. Yi Junqing cursed darkly, then walked around Yarrow Moen and left Guan Osprey Palace. 1,000,000 taels? Why didn't she just rob someone? However, Yi Junqing never expected that in just one night, he would meet the legendary idiot. The next morning, Yi Junqing heard Yang Nansheng's voice before he even walked in. Why are you here? Yi Junqing looked towards Yang Nansheng in confusion as he slowly walked into the main hall of Guan Osprey Palace. If it weren't for you, why would I be here? It's a Flame Soul Sword. How did you lose to her? At the time, no matter how Yang Nansheng had been tricked, he still felt that Yarrow Moen was as beautiful as a fairy. However, when he saw Yarrow Moen's expression as she carefully examined the banknotes, he only felt that this woman's face was disgusting. You couldn't have really spent 1,000,000 taels of gold to buy the Flame Soul sword, right? Yi Junqing looked towards Yang Nanxing in shock. So this was what an idiot looked like. What else? She wanted to melt the sword down. Yarrow Moen is truly sinister. Yang Nanxing sighed in grief and indignation. Yarrow Moen, how malicious added Yi Junqing mournfully. This kind of thing is consensual. Why? Unwilling? Then take the banknotes back. Moen doesn't like to force things. Yarrow Moen sat down lazily on the chair and handed the banknotes to Yang Nanxing. As he looked at the banknotes in front of him, Yang Nanxing suddenly heard the sound of his heart breaking. Did he kill Yarrow Moen's entire family in his previous life? Really? Is that so? Take the money and hand over the sword. Yi Junqing took a deep breath and glared at Yarrow Moen. Ting Yu, bring the sword over to Prince. Yarrow Moen took back the banknotes and her lips curved into a beautiful smile. Just as Yi Junqing was about to reach for the sword, Yang Nanxing practically moved in front of Ting Yu and abruptly picked up the sword and hung it on his waist. That's this prince's sword. Yi Junqing turned to look towards Yang Nanxing. But that's my silver. It's 1,000,000 taels of gold. How many Flame Soul swords can I forge with that? Yang Nanxing's grip on the sword tightened even more as grief and indignation appeared in his eyes. Don't take it too hard. After all, this is the only sword your master forged personally. Yarrow Moen pretended to be kind as she comforted him. Otherwise, do you think this noble one is an idiot? Junior brother, senior brother will help you keep this sword for now. If it ends up in your hands, senior brother really won't have much silver left. Please be more careful. Ari. Yang Nanxing shook his head mournfully, then turned to leave. What did he mean by that? Did this prince do it willingly? Yi Junqing said angrily when he saw Yang Nanxing leave in disappointment. Yin Shui, hand over the banknotes. Yarrow Moen ignored Yi Junqing and called for Yin Shui. She handed the banknotes to her. Yin Shui accepted the order and disappeared from Guan Osprey Palace after taking the banknotes. What do you need so much silver for? Asked Yi Junqing when he saw that Yarrow Moen seemed to sigh in relief. Is it a lot? Yarrow Moen countered with a question. Yi Junqing almost fainted. That night, when Yin Shui brought Zhu Chen into the secret room, they saw a woman standing in front of An Bingshan. You guys better hurry up. Don't let the people outside wait too long and cause problems. Yin Shui instructed before turning to leave. Zhu Chen didn't hesitate and immediately walked over. Only then did he recognize the woman in front of him. It was Ming Yu from the pill refinement room. Ming Yu, you're just a lowly maid who's eating from my side. Why did you lie? Why did you betray Zijia? On the rack, An Bingshan's eyes were bloodshot as he roared angrily. The metal chains on the rack clanked as he struggled. For Hong Mei. Ming Yu's expression was cold and her dark eyes were like the most malevolent devil in hell. Hong Mei? An Bingshan frowned as he repeated the name. How could Ming Yu forget? How could a great noble like Eunuch and remember Hong Mei? But Ming Yu can't forget. She can't forget how Eunuch and bullied and humiliated Hong Mei, how he used a small knife to scrape off her flesh, and how he threw the dying Hong Mei to those damned eunuchs for them to humiliate. Tears rolled down her face. Ming Yu's choked voice was accompanied by An Bingshan's howls, causing Zhu Chen to feel hurt. Stop. Hurry and stop. Hong Mei died in your hands. If you want to get revenge for her, then you should kill yourself. An Bingshan howled in pain. The flesh on his leg was trembling. Yes. Hong Mei died in Ming Yu's hands. But if it wasn't for you, how could Ming Yu have personally killed her best sister? You deserve to die. Ming Yu fiercely gripped the dagger in An Bingshan's leg and twisted it. An Bingshan's howls grew louder and louder like a pig being slaughtered. Stop. Zijia is dying of pain. Cold sweat broke out on An Bingshan's forehead as he struggled with all his might against the chains. Eunuch couldn't endure it with just one cut. If Ming Yu remembered correctly, Hong Mei suffered 50 cuts from Eunuch and 50 cuts. What kind of pain was that? So how could one cut be enough? As Ming Yu spoke, She suddenly pulled out the dagger and stabbed it towards Bingshan's other leg. "Save me! Save me!" Bingshan howled hysterically, the flesh on his face twitching in pain. "Save me!" Chapter 249. Ah! Bingshan cried out in pain. Mingyu wiped the tears from her eyes and finally saw Ju Chen clearly. "Bingshan, even if you're cut into 1,000 pieces, it won't be enough to quell the hatred in Ju Chen's heart. Your lowly life isn't worthy of being buried with the second prince, but what can we do? Ju Chen can only do this." As Ju Chen spoke, he cut off Bingshan's right arm, then his legs, then his eyes. Finally, Ju Chen handed the dagger to Mingyu and pointed it at Bingshan's heart. Mingyu understood and immediately used all the strength in her body to stab the dagger into Bingshan's heart. "Let's go." When he saw Bingshan take his last breath, Ju Chen let out a long sigh, then pulled Mingyu out of the secret room. Ju Chen and Mingyu were the generous gifts Yarrow Moen had prepared for Yi Junqing. Loyal and righteous people like them were hard to come by. The next day, when the guards brought Bingshan, who was in a terrible state, in front of Yi Hongyi flew into a rage. This, in addition to Ju Chen's sudden disappearance and the destruction of the pill refining room, made Yi Hongyi even more furious. At this moment, he believed that Bingshan had been wrongly accused, but what could he do? "Wanna, why were we so muddle-headed? That Ju Chen came to get revenge for Yi Mohan. We actually believed him. Ha ha ha. How could we possibly believe him? If Morshin was here, we might not have." In Guan Osprey Palace, Yi Hongyi took a huge gulp of wine as his body swayed and leaned against Yarrow Moen. "If eldest sister was here, your majesty wouldn't have done anything," asked Yarrow Moen indifferently. Her heart was as cold as a lake. We wouldn't have been tricked. With Morshin here, we don't need to think about anything. Our empire. But we just hate it." She said great kindness turned into enmity. "Yes. We just hate her. Why does she have to think ahead of us? Why does she have to show off? She deserves to die. It's good that she died. It's good that she died." Yi Hongyi tilted his head back and poured all the wine in the jug into his mouth. "I had eyes but failed to recognize my beloved, and I do deserve to die. But in this world, anyone can say that I deserve to die, only you can't. Yi Hongyi, I've done everything for you. If it wasn't for me, who knows how many times you would have died already. Would you still be able to enjoy life here? Morshin said that if she was reborn, she would definitely tear your corpse into 10,000 pieces, so you have to live properly. Don't ever eat any more panacea." His hot and moist breath landed on Yarrow Moan's snow-white neck, instantly turning into beads of ice. Yi Hongyi kissed the beauty in front of him wildly. In the end, he still couldn't see the beauty's true face. Inside Pure Flower's palace, Yarrow Sulwan was currently venting her anger on a palace maid. On the ground, a palace maid dressed in white had already been beaten black and blue. "Your Highness, this servant was wrong." The palace maid curled up on the ground, her pale face drained of blood. She begged humbly, blood seeping out of her mouth. "Wrong? You can get back my snow leopard just because you said it was wrong. No matter what, this empress must avenge the snow leopard today." The whip that Yarrow Sulwan raised came down fiercely. The palace maid gritted her teeth as she endured the bone-piercing pain. Tears streamed down her face. "Second older sister is so fierce. That palace maid is about to die. Tingyu, quickly help her up." Yarrow Mo Wn timidly ordered Tingyu. Tingyu accepted the order and placed the food box on the ground, then immediately walked in front of the palace maid. How could Yarrow Sulwan let the matter rest? She fiercely swung the whip at Tingyu. Fortunately, Liu Xing reacted quickly and immediately rushed over to grab the whip. "Audacious! How could a servant like you dare to touch Ben Gong's things? Scram!" As Yarrow Sulwan glared at Liu Xing, Tingyu had already helped the little palace made out of Pure Flower's palace. It's true that Liu Xing is a servant, But does second older sister believe that? Even if Liu Xing charged up and killed you right now, Ben Gong still has a way to protect this servant's life. Also, if second older sister wants to seek justice for that evil dog, you can go find His Majesty. Why bother with a palace maid? Yarrow Mo Wn bent down to pick up the food box and walked in front of Liu Xing. Liu Xing understood his master's intentions and immediately released Yarrow Sulwan's whip, then respectfully left Pure Flower's palace. Yarrow Mo Wn, what did you come here for? Pure Flower's palace doesn't welcome you. Yarrow Sulwan angrily put away the whip and looked towards Yarrow Mo Wn hatefully. Second older sister doesn't welcome Mo Wan? But Mo Wan is the Empress. It's not second older sister's place to talk about what she wants. What should I do? Yarrow Mo Wn smiled lightly as she looked towards Yarrow Sulwan, then casually took out a cup of tea from the food box. What is this? Yarrow Sulwan looked towards Yarrow Mo Wn warily and asked suspiciously. This is tea that Mo Wan personally brewed for second older sister. Second older sister isn't coming over to take a look. As Yarrow Mo Wn spoke, she slowly sat down and looked towards Yarrow Sulwan lazily. When Yarrow Sulwan saw the red pill in the tea, she was greatly shocked. Yarrow Mo Wan, you want to poison Ben Gong to death. Ben Gong won't drink it. Even His Majesty doesn't dare to kill Ben Gong. How could you dare? Yarrow Sulwan retreated in fear as she looked towards Yarrow Mo Wn resentfully. If second older sister's brain has mold, then you should go out and bask in it. If Mo Wan really wanted you to die, why would you wait until now? Second older sister, take a good look. Can't you recognize this pill? Yarrow Mo Wn snorted disdainfully. At this point, Yarrow Sulwan was already like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bow. To her, living was already a form of torture. When Yarrow Sulwan heard this, she calmed down and returned to the table to carefully examine the pill in the teacup. Zhu Chen is one of your people. The moment Yarrow Sulwan recognized the pill, she was shocked and looked towards Yarrow Mo Wan in shock. It's very obvious, isn't it? Yarrow Mo Wan shrugged as she spoke resentfully. How is that possible? How could he be one of your people? Then that palace maid just now is also one of your people. Is that why you came to save her? Yarrow Mo Wan, who else in this palace is one of your people? Speak. Who else is there? Yarrow Sulwan looked towards Yarrow Mo Wan in disbelief, her face as white as paper. She had thought that Bingshan's death was a coincidence, but now it seemed that it had been Yarrow Mo Wan's plan. Every time Yarrow Sulwan thought of Bingshan's death, she would feel fear from the bottom of her heart. What's so important about who Moan's people are? As long as second older sister is careful enough, it's impossible for Moan to find out everything. Look at this pill, it's been soaked in water for so long and it still hasn't melted. Does second older sister think that His Majesty is blind? Yarrow Mo Wan couldn't help but shake her head as she mocked. Yarrow Mo Wan, what exactly are you trying to say? Yarrow Sulwan looked towards Yarrow Mo Wan in shock. Moan just wants to remind second older sister that if His Majesty really dies, second older sister's fate definitely won't be any better than it is now. Yarrow Mo Wan restrained the ridicule in her eyes and her expression turned cold. Why should this consort believe you? Yarrow Sulwan snorted coldly as she looked towards Yarrow Mo Wan, a trace of suspicion flashing through her eyes. Second older sister, don't forget that if Yi Hongyi suddenly dies, Yi Junqing will be the only one who can inherit the throne. You know how Yi Junqing treats eldest sister the best. Now that he already knows that you're the one who caused eldest sister's death, how good do you think your fate will be if someone like that becomes the emperor? Yarrow Mo Wan looked towards Yarrow Sulwan sympathetically. Why are you reminding this consort of all this? Yarrow Sulwan suddenly understood. She had only been thinking that once Yi Hongyi died, she would be free. She had forgotten that if Yi Junqing succeeded the throne, her fate would probably be several times worse than it was now. That's not all. In reality, second older sister shouldn't be thinking about how to take Yi Hongyi's life, but how to find a way out for yourself. Moan heard that Meng Yuan is an ungoverned area between Shu and Yu. If second older sister can escape this imperial palace and is lucky enough to reach Mongyuan, then you'll be able to keep your life. As Yarrow Mo Wn spoke, she casually picked up a teacup and poured the water inside onto the ground. Black smoke rose into the air. Mongyuan. What scheme do you have now? Yarrow Sulwan frowned as she looked towards Yarrow Mo Wn coldly. She wasn't stupid enough to think that Yarrow Mo Wn was saying all of this for her own good. Chapter 250. Just take it as Moan's momentary kindness for the sake of brotherly affection. Yarrow Moan smiled leisurely and got up. Brotherly affection? You could even kill your own father, how could you still care about brotherly affection? Yarrow Sulwan didn't think much of it. Yarrow Moan was speechless. Yarrow Moan only smiled faintly at Yarrow Sulwan before walking away gracefully. The moment Yarrow Moan left Pure Flower's palace, Yarrow Sulwan fell back onto her chair. Her clenched fists trembled uncontrollably as she looked at the blackened tea stain on the ground. Yarrow Sulwan's heart gradually wavered. In the imperial garden, Yi Junqing pretended to run into Yarrow Moan. Prince dropped this. Before Yi Junqing could react, Yarrow Moan had already handed him the body jade. Why is this in your hands? Yi Junqing quickly took the body jade and looked towards Yarrow Moan suspiciously. With Yang Nanxing's 1,000,000 taels of gold, Moan wouldn't be so poor that she would steal. Prince accidentally dropped it when you were eavesdropping in Pure Flower's palace. Yarrow Moan mercilessly exposed Yi Junqing's sneaky actions. Cough cough. Who eavesdropped? Who did this prince eavesdrop on? Yi Junqing's face flushed red as he stubbornly refuted. If Prince didn't eavesdrop, then Moan doesn't need to explain, right? Yarrow Moan looked towards Yi Junqing with a mischievous smile. Her clear eyes sparkled under the sunlight. All right, this prince really wants to know, why did you bring Yarrow Sulwan to Mongyuan? Although she's your second older sister, she caused Morshin's death. Are you just going to watch as she goes to Mongyuan to live a carefree life? Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moan angrily as he questioned her in a low voice. Carefree? Prince, don't forget that Ben Lei and the others are in Mongyuan. Yarrow Moan's cherry lips curved slightly, the smile in her eyes causing Yi Junqing to shiver. But this prince still doesn't understand. Why did you have Yarrow Sulwan go to Mongyuan? Her days here aren't easy either. Yi Junqing was more or less worried. Prince will understand in the future. Also, Moan promises Prince that Yarrow Sulwan's days in Mongyuan definitely won't be any better than here, said Yarrow Moan leisurely, her voice filled with determination. But, just as Yi Junqing was about to question her further, Ting Yu suddenly ran over. Niang Niang, something's happened. Ting Yu anxiously walked over to Yarrow Moan and glanced towards Yi Junqing. What is it? Yarrow Moan lifted her brows towards Ting Yu. When this servant sent that palace maid to the imperial hospital, I heard a piece of news. It said that the emperor had already agreed to the peace marriage with the Da Xia kingdom. Ting Yu reported truthfully. Peace marriage, isn't that big of a deal? Yarrow Mo Wan didn't think much of it. Peace marriages between countries had existed since ancient times and were commonplace. But the marriage this time is different. This servant heard them say that Your Majesty has already agreed to Bactria's emperor. Not only will the esteemed prince be allowed to marry Bactria's honored princess, but is also allowed the esteemed prince to marry into Bactria. The honored princess of Great Xia was about to arrive at Great Chu. What should we do? Ting Yu looked towards Yarrow Moan worriedly. Yarrow Moan was speechless. When she heard this, a cold light flashed through her eyes. Preposterous. How could His Majesty do this? This prince will go find His Majesty right now to argue. Yi Junqing was enraged and his eyes turned cold. Just as he was about to leave, Yarrow Moan stopped him. What does Prince think you can change by going now? Yarrow Moan restrained the coldness in her eyes and looked towards Yi Junqing. This prince can have His Majesty annul this marriage. As long as this prince doesn't agree, no one will dare to force this prince to marry another woman, said Yi Junqing angrily. Yarrow Moen shrugged speechlessly and didn't stop him. When Ting Yu saw Yi Juanqing's ruthless figure leave, she carefully moved closer to Yarrow Moen. Your Highness, the honored princess of Great Xia has already crossed the border and will arrive at Chu Palace in a few days. Even if Prince argues strongly, His Majesty might not annul this peace marriage. What should we do? Ting Yu looked towards Yarrow Moen with worry in her heart. Yarrow Moen smiled sweetly. When Yi Juanqing's figure disappeared from her line of sight, she leisurely walked back to Guan Osprey Palace. When Ting Yu saw that her master wasn't saying anything, it wasn't good to keep asking, so she followed behind her with a worried expression. About 2 hours later, just as Yarrow Moen was lazily leaning against the chaise lounge with Fluffy in her arms, she suddenly felt a gust of wind rush in from the door. That azure dress rushed in with a bang. Fluffy was so frightened that she scrambled out of Yarrow Moen's embrace. His Majesty has gone too far. He's actually not willing to see this prince. Does he think he can hide for the rest of his life? Yi Juanqing angrily sat on the chair and roared in a low voice. He doesn't need to hide for the rest of his life. He only needs to hide until Prince returns to Great Xia with the honored princess. Yarrow Moen rubbed Fluffy's fluffy head comfortingly. This prince is in trouble right now. Other than making sarcastic remarks, can't you say something that makes people feel better? Can't you? Yi Juanqing glared at Yarrow Moen. I heard that the honored princess is devastatingly beautiful as a flower. Yarrow Moen nodded fiercely. No matter what, this prince will not marry that honored princess, said Yi Juanqing resolutely. The princess is already about to reach the imperial city. Does Prince think that just saying you won't marry is enough? Yarrow Moen lightly patted Fluffy, then got up and walked around Yi Juanqing gracefully to sit down. She picked up the purple sand pot and poured a cup of tea, then pushed it over. Then what should this prince do? Yi Juanqing had a worried expression as he looked towards Yarrow Moen. No matter what, the honored princess is still a princess of a country. She's more than enough to be a good match for Prince. Prince's current expression of great bitterness and deep hatred is a bit unreasonable, said Yarrow Moen disapprovingly. This prince isn't being unreasonable. This prince is truly unreasonable. Even if the honored princess was a fairy that had descended into the mortal world, this prince wouldn't even spare her a glance. Other people might not know, but you should understand that in this prince's heart. Yi Juanqing looked towards Yarrow Moen with a serious expression. Does Prince only have elder sister in your heart? If the honored princess found out that she couldn't even compare to a dead person, who knows what kind of world would flip? Yarrow Moen looked towards Yi Juanqing playfully, a trace of warmth in her heart. Yarrow Moen. Yi Juanqing was enraged. His eyebrows were already on fire, yet Yarrow Moen was still in the mood to joke around. Returning to the main topic, does Prince know why His Majesty betrothed Great Xia's honored princess to you as a princess consort? And why he even agreed to let you marry into Great Xia? Yarrow Moen restrained the playfulness in her eyes and looked towards Yi Juanqing solemnly. I don't know. It was very clear that Yi Juanqing wasn't in a good state to think right now. One word, poor. Yarrow Moen criticized the current situation. What do you mean? Yi Juanqing lifted his brows as he looked towards Yarrow Moen in confusion. Prince already knew of His Majesty's taboo towards Prince, but because of Prince's prestige in Great Chu, Prince never dared to act. Thus, His Majesty settled for the next best thing and sent Prince out of Great Chu, to the country that everyone knows is the poorest in the entire continent. His intentions are clear. Firstly, Prince not being in Great Chu would solve His Majesty's immediate problem. Secondly, even if Prince is a dragon among men, in Great Xia, you can only be considered a dragon swimming on shallow waters. You won't be able to cause any big waves, so there's no need for you to worry about in the long run. Yarrow Moen's expression was solemn and her voice was as cold as ice. Her eyes were as bright as stars. Does His Majesty really mean this? A trace of sorrow appeared in Yi Juanqing's eyes. Ever since Mo Xin passed away, he had already become so lowly in front of Yi Hongyi that he had no bottom line. Even so, he still couldn't bring Yi Hongyi a little peace of mind. What else? Yarrow Moen lifted her brows as she filled Yi Juanqing's cup with tea. Chapter 251. No matter what, this prince definitely won't take Shororong as my wife, even if I die, said Yi Junqing indifferently, a layer of frost covering his eyes. However, the moment Yi Junqing closed his mouth, he heard Yarrow Moen suddenly put down the teapot and look at him angrily. Prince makes it sound so easy. There's an old saying that death can be heavier than Mount Tai, but also lighter than a goose feather. If Prince loses your life because of refusing the marriage, forget about Moen, even eldest sister in the underworld will look down on Prince. Yarrow Moen was angry that he could say death so easily. But, there's no buts. Back then, Prince thought that eldest sister had willingly left that testimony to restrict Prince, so Prince was willing to give up your military power in exchange for eldest sister to die in peace. But now, Prince is very clear that Yarrow Sulwan had forced eldest sister to sign that testimony. It wasn't eldest sister's original intention at all. In this way, Prince doesn't need to be afraid. Right now, His Majesty was unjust towards Prince, so don't blame Prince for being heartless in the future. As of now, Yarrow Moen had already paved a bright path for Yi Junqing. As soon as Yi Junqing decided to rebel, she would do everything she could to help Yi Junqing take back everything that should have belonged to him. Morxin is in love with Yi Hongyi, which is why she helped Yi Hongyi build up the current state of Great Chu. So regardless of whether there's that testimony or not, this prince won't easily take away Yi Hongyi's throne. You don't need to say anything about this in the future. Yi Junqing's expression was sorrowful and his eyes were dim. Yarrow Moen suddenly stood up and took a step forward to raise the teacup in front of Yi Junqing. With a slight flick of her wrist, the tea splashed all over the floor. What are you doing? Yarrow Moen's actions spoiled the mood for Yi Junqing. Did you pour this tea? Yarrow Moen looked towards Yi Junqing angrily. That's not it, but... Yi Junqing was slightly startled. He still felt that Yarrow Moen's actions were a bit excessive. If Prince has the time to but, why don't you go back and prepare? You're about to become Bactria's live-in son-in-law. This kind of good thing can only be chanced upon and not sought after. However, Prince should still bring more silver with you. That place is so poor that there's only one word left to describe it. Yarrow Moen casually placed the teacup on the table and turned to walk into the inner chambers. What word? Asked Yi Junqing. Poor. Yarrow Moen said through clenched teeth. Then she slammed the door shut. All that was left was Yi Junqing, whose face was filled with black lines. He tossed and turned restlessly for several days. Even when the honored princess of Bactria moved into Harmony Palace, Yi Junqing still couldn't think of a way to get rid of this marriage. Yi Hongyi's refusal to meet him in particular made Yi Junqing feel completely at a loss. He had no choice but to lower himself to beg Yarrow Moen. Cough cough. Now that the honored princess has moved in, what do you think this king should do? Although begging for help didn't feel good, the feeling of being married to such a remote and desolate place wasn't necessarily any better. Especially since Yi Junqing had never planned on taking a wife. In this world, he wouldn't be moved by any other woman. This was what Yi Junqing was thinking. Does this matter have anything to do with Moen? Yarrow Moen had been neither gloomy nor clear these past few days, and her tone was neither sullen nor angry. At this time, Yarrow Moen was looking at the steamed fish on the table as she tapped her bowl with her chopsticks. Of course it's related. If this king isn't here, who's going to get food for you? As Yi Junqing spoke, he picked up a piece of fish and placed it in Yarrow Moen's bowl. His expression was one of eagerness, sincerity, and anticipation. Although it feels good to have someone get food for you, Moen really doesn't know what to do about this matter. Prince should just do as you see fit. Yarrow Moen truly hadn't thought of a better way to get rid of the honored princess, but just because she hadn't thought of anything didn't mean that she would let anyone take Yi Junqing away. Give the fish back to this prince. When Yi Junqing heard this, his expression abruptly changed. He immediately tried to pick up the fish, but he was already a step too late. Prince, there's no need to. Achoo. Before Yarrow Moen could finish speaking, she smelled a thick fragrance of cosmetics. Yarrow Moen's nose twitched and she immediately sneezed. Your Highness, please forgive me. This servant wanted to report this to Your Highness, but the honored princess insisted on barging in. Ting Yu ran to Yaromoan's side first and begged for forgiveness in a low voice. It's fine. Yaromoan hid the shrewdness in her eyes and put on a naive expression. At the side, Yi Juanqing's heart went cold. He turned to look and saw a woman enter gracefully. Accompanied by the thick fragrance of cosmetics, Yaromoan could clearly see a woman shining with golden light standing at the entrance of Guan Osprey Palace. The woman in front of her was dressed in a luxurious dress that was as thin as a cicada's wings. She had a scarlet gold scale shawl over her shoulders and a jade belt tied around her waist. The bloodstone in the middle was a dazzling red. She wore a long skirt that trailed behind her. Every fold of the skirt was inlaid with 100 plump and round pearls. In total, there were at least 1,000 pearls in the entire skirt. At this time, the woman walked in with her head lowered. Out of the sunlight, Yaromoan finally saw the woman's appearance clearly. People said that light and heavy makeup were always suitable, but the woman in front of her was clearly wearing too much makeup. Her brows were as black as ink and her lips were as red as blood. That face in particular, even though she was so close, Yaromoan still felt like she was looking at a monkey's butt. And this person was Bactria's king's most beloved princess, Xia Furong. You said that Bactria is very poor? Yi Juanqing glanced at Yaromoan, unable to conceal the doubt in his voice. She couldn't have worn all the toys in Bactria's treasury on herself, right? Yaromoan couldn't help but shake her head as she said this resentfully. Furong has just entered Great Chu and has yet to pay her respects to the esteemed prince. Prince, please forgive me for suddenly appearing in front of Prince. The delicate voice was gentle and sweet, but when Yi Juanqing heard it, he felt a boundless chill. Ahem. So it's the princess of Bactria. Juanqing has been impolite. Even if he didn't want to face her, she was already standing right in front of him. Yi Juanqing couldn't just pretend that he didn't see her. Prince isn't being impolite. It's Furong who has come uninvited. Prince wouldn't mind, right? Xia Furong dragged the luxurious dress that weighed more than 10 catties and bowed once more. How could Juanqing mind? Achoo. Princess is worrying too much. Yi Juanqing rubbed his nose and helplessly returned the greeting. Based on Xia Furong's status, Yi Juanqing really did need to treat her with courtesy. Furong isn't worrying too much. It's just that it's really inappropriate for me to suddenly appear here. No matter what, Furong should have given Prince a heads up first. Xia Furong bowed endlessly. Her fragrant scent wafted towards Yaromoan, causing Yaromoan to sneeze non-stop. It wasn't easy for her to find an opening to speak. Achoo. Please stay away from me, it's so choking. Yaromoan covered her nose as she looked towards Xia Furong in disgust. How dare you? Who do you think you are to dare speak to the honored princess like that? Before Xia Furong could reply, the fiendish servant behind her pointed at Yaromoan's nose and started cursing. Forgive Juanqing for speaking bluntly, but the princess's attendant actually dares to insult our great Chu's empress like this. She truly has no upbringing. Yi Juanqing's voice was cold and emotionless, but anger had already appeared on his handsome face. Pa! The moment Yi Juanqing's words fell silent, Xia Furong suddenly turned around and slapped the attendant. The attendant who had been bossing around earlier instantly wilted like a frosted eggplant. Even though blood was flowing out of the corner of his mouth, he didn't dare to raise his hand to wipe it away. Yaromoan took in all of this and sneered inwardly. She had originally thought that the children of poor countries matured early, but she hadn't expected that they would also be corrupted masters. However, this was also fine. Fortunately, they were just paper tigers. At the very least, they were easier to deal with than sheep in wolf's skin. You're so fierce. Yaromoan looked towards Xia Furong timidly as her eyes sparkled. When Xia Furong heard this, she immediately retracted her malevolent expression and turned around bashfully to look towards Yi Juanqing. Chapter 252. Prince is right. Your Highness the Empress has a body of 1,000 gold, so how could this servant criticize you like this? It's all because of this lowly servant. Hibiscus normally doesn't hit people. Xia Furong's eyes sparkled as she hurriedly clarified. At the side, Yarrow Moen snorted disdainfully. Her movements were so nimble, yet she dared to say that she normally didn't hit people. It's fine as long as Princess knows that Your Highness the Empress has a body of 1,000 gold. Junqing still has important matters to attend to, so he won't be accompanying you. As Yi Junqing spoke, he turned towards Yarrow Moen and cupped his fists. After bowing solemnly, he walked backwards out of Guan Osprey Palace. Prince, where are you going? Hibiscus will accompany you. When Xia Furong saw that Yi Junqing had left, she immediately turned to chase after him. Her dress shone with a golden light when exposed to the sunlight, causing people's eyes to hurt. When the maids behind her saw this, they also jogged to catch up. Only after Xia Furong left did Yarrow Moen sigh of relief. Your Highness, do you think that Xia Furong is blind? Didn't she see that you were sitting here? Muttered Tingyu angrily. How should I say this? This consort feels that Xia Furong is blind, and the 2 palace maids behind her are also blind. Basically, everyone in Bactria is blind. Yarrow Moen was also angry. She had never been ignored like this before. Perhaps it was because Yi Hongyi was afraid of meeting Yi Junqing after agreeing to the peace marriage, so even though Xia Furong had already moved into Harmony Palace, Yi Hongyi still didn't appear. That night, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. Occasionally, clouds would pass by, covering up the bright moonlight. The entire world was hazy. Inside Harmony Palace, Xia Furong sat angrily on a chair. Her skirt accidentally scraped against a corner of the dressing table, causing a pearl to roll out. Hurry and pick it up, shouted Xia Furong anxiously. The maid naturally didn't dare to tarry and hurriedly chased after the pearl. However, her feet unexpectedly slipped and she abruptly stepped on the pearl. The maid's heart instantly turned cold and she timidly lifted her foot. However, the pearl had already turned to powder and turned to dust when the wind blew past. Slap. The maid had just raised her face when she was slapped. Princess, please spare my life. I didn't mean to, please spare my life. The maid immediately knelt on the ground. Her body trembled, and her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. It was a stark contrast to the blood seeping from the corner of her mouth. Spare me. Do you know how precious this pearl is? You can't even afford it with your cheap lives. See if this empress doesn't beat you to death. Xia Furong's expression twisted as she picked up the chair next to her and was about to throw it at the maid. Princess, please spare our Z. Right now, you only have 2 personal maids. If one of them dies for no reason, it will definitely arouse the esteemed prince's suspicion. Princess, for the sake of the esteemed prince, please spare our Z for now. At the side, the maid called Bai knelt on the ground and begged mournfully. Almost at the same time, the chair in Xia Furong's hands was thrown out with a bang and smashed into Bai's head. Blood immediately gushed out like a fountain. Even though the pain was unbearable, Bai still knelt there and covered her wound with both hands. She didn't even dare to breathe loudly. You still dare to mention the esteemed prince in front of this empress? This empress was telling you not to lose face in front of that fool, but I didn't tell you to be so tactless in front of the esteemed prince. You sure have a good time scolding him. Just look at this entire day. Yi Junqing hasn't even said a single proper sentence to this empress. It's all your fault. Xia Furong's eyes were bloodshot and looked as if they were about to split open. Her expression was like that of a demon from hell, causing people to keep quiet out of fear. Princess, spare me. Bai didn't dare to argue and could only bury her head between her knees as she begged bitterly. At the side, RZ crawled over to Bai's side and knelt in the same humble manner in front of Xia Furong. This servant knows that this servant has sinned and knows that even if I die 1,000 times, I still wouldn't be able to repay this pearl. This servant only hopes that Princess can calm down. This servant's death isn't to be regretted, but I'm afraid that if this servant dies, there won't be anyone to serve master. RZ was well aware that in her master's eyes, their lives were as cheap as ants. If they wanted to live, they could only beg bitterly. There was no other way. You also know that your life is cheap. Don't you know that these pearls and golden scales were all borrowed from the country of Qi? In order to borrow these things, Imperial Father had expended a lot of effort. Now that one of them has been trampled on, how do you want this Empress to explain this to Imperial Father? Xia Furong walked back to the dressing table angrily, her eyes filled with viciousness. These servants know their wrongs. At this time, RZ and Bai could only kowtow and admit their wrongs. All of you, scram. Xia Furong waved her hands in disgust to send the two servants away. Then she rubbed her temples, her expression filled with anxiety. In Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moen had untied her hair, so her fine black hair cascaded down like a waterfall. Under the illumination of the candlelight, it looked like a splendid rainbow. It was borrowed? Yarrow Moen turned to look towards Yin Shui as she spoke in realization. This subordinate heard everything clearly. All of the ornaments on Xia Furong's body and head were borrowed by King Xia from King Qi. When this subordinate returned, Xia Furong was in a terrible rage over a pearl. Yin Shui reported everything she had seen. Feng Yihan really dared to borrow. He's not afraid of not being able to return what he borrowed. Yarrow Moen's eyes were like deep pools as she turned to look at the copper mirror and subconsciously fiddled with the pear blossom comb in her hands. She had probably guessed Feng Yihan's intentions, but unfortunately, Yi Junqing was someone she couldn't let go of, so Feng Yihan's wishful thinking had been wasted. Right at this time, there was a sound at the door. Yarrow Moen originally thought it was Ting Yu and was about to speak when she heard a familiar voice. "Are you asleep?" asked the clear and melodious voice. Yarrow Moen was slightly shaken when she heard this, then she glanced at Yin Shui. Once Yin Shui left, Yarrow Moen put down the pear blossom comb and walked to the door. She gently opened it. "Prince came so late at night. Could it be that you have some thoughts about Moen?" Yarrow Moen wore a crescent white inner garment and a few strands of long hair fell on her chest. Especially that face, after removing her makeup, her appearance was like a lotus flower that had just emerged from the water, untainted by a speck of dust. Her skin was soft like water, making people want to go up and pinch it. Perhaps it was because he had been facing Xia Furong for the entire day, but Yi Junqing suddenly felt that the Yarrow Moen in front of him was so beautiful that it couldn't be found anywhere else in the world. "Does Prince not saying anything mean that you're tacitly agreeing? Actually, it's not impossible for Prince to have Moen accompany you to sleep. Moen has never planned on being faithful to His Majesty, but in terms of the price." Yarrow Moen ignored the change in Yi Junqing's expression and stretched out a finger to lift Yi Junqing's perfect chin. "Achoo, don't joke around, this prince has something to ask of you." Yi Junqing sneezed so hard that he wanted to spray Yarrow Moen out the window. Yarrow Moen was speechless. She pulled back her finger and fiercely wiped at her beautiful face. Her heart was filled with endless resentment. "What does Prince need? Can't we talk about it tomorrow? Moen wants to sleep." Yarrow Moen walked over to Yi Junqing's side with small steps and lifted her brows. "We can't wait until tomorrow morning. That Xia Furong said that she wants to eat with this prince tomorrow morning. What should we do?" Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moen with a mournful expression. "Prince should first look in the mirror and see just how twisted your face has become." At this moment, Yi Junqing's face was clearly written with the word bad luck. "Yarrow Moen, save me." How could Yi Junqing be in the mood to look in the mirror? He immediately picked up a teacup and took large gulps of water. "Oh, it seems that Xia Furong doesn't seem to have Prince's heart." When Yarrow Moen saw Yi Junqing like this, she sat down with interest and looked towards Yi Junqing meaningfully. "You don't know how this prince has been spending his days. That honored princess has been following this prince ever since she left Guan Osprey Palace. From the imperial garden to the imperial kitchen, then to the imperial hospital, and even when this prince went to pay his respects, cough cough. In any case, no matter what this prince does, she has to follow. It's impossible to shake her off. Yarrow Moen, this prince really can't take it anymore. As long as you can help this prince get rid of her, this prince will give you 100 taels of gold," said Yi Junqing resolutely. Chapter 253. That's easy. Yin Shui, kill her. Yarrow Moen was rather efficient and immediately gave the order. Wait. This prince isn't asking you to kill her. This prince wants you to help this prince get rid of her. If this prince could kill her, would this prince still need to beg you? Achoo. Even now, Yi Juanqing's nose was still filled with that thick fragrance. Actually, prince shouldn't be too harsh. In Moen's opinion, that honored princess is also quite pitiful. Yarrow Moen pinched her throat as she looked towards Yi Juanqing with a sorrowful expression. Did you take the wrong medicine? She's pitiful. This was the first time Yi Juanqing had hated a woman to this extent. Prince might not know this, but the pearls and golden scales on Xia Furong's body were actually all borrowed by Emperor Xia from Feng Yihan. From this, it can be seen that in order to meet Prince, the honored princess had put in a lot of effort, but Prince. Yarrow Moen looked towards Yi Juanqing with hidden bitterness as if she was Xia Furong herself. Stop. Tell me, how much? If Yi Juanqing believed that Yarrow Moen was pitying Xia Furong, then he would have lived with Yarrow Moen for nothing. 5,000 taels of gold, non-negotiable. Yarrow Moen put away her weeping expression and her eyes lit up like stars. Yarrow Moen, it's truly a great loss for the bandit world that you're no longer a bandit. 5,000 taels of gold? Why don't you sell this prince and see if it's worth that price? Do you think this prince is Yang Nansheng? Yi Juanqing suddenly regretted knocking on this door and immediately got up to leave. Prince, have a good trip. Forgive me for not seeing you off, said Yarrow Moen as she leisurely leaned against the chair. Seeing that Yarrow Moen had no intention of stopping him, Yi Juanqing returned to his seat. How about 500 taels of gold? Yi Juanqing looked towards Yarrow Moen solemnly. When he saw that Yarrow Moen wasn't responding, he hardened his heart. 1,000 taels of gold. How about it? This was the limit of what Yi Juanqing could offer. 5,000 taels. Yarrow Moen lifted her delicate face and smiled at Yi Juanqing. Her innocent and pure face was beautiful and flawless, but in Yi Juanqing's eyes, it was incomparably sinister. Yarrow Moen only sighed in relief when she heard Yi Juanqing slam the door. She walked onto the bed and fell asleep. Since Xia lacked money as usual, this matter was much easier to deal with. The next day, Yarrow Moen had just finished washing up and hadn't even left the bedroom when she heard Xia Furong's voice coming from the main hall. At this moment, Liu Xing hastily pushed open the door and entered. Niang Niang, that honored princess is looking down on you more and more. Breakfast has already been prepared in the main hall and she's currently ordering her servant girl to invite the esteemed prince over. Liu Xing wanted to stop her, but in the end, she was the princess of a country. Without the permission of his master, he could not afford to offend her. This Xia Furong. She thought she was still in the great Xia kingdom, a dove occupying a magpie's nest. How hateful. Niang Niang, this servant will help you chase her out right now. At the side, Ting Yu angrily started to move but was stopped by Yarrow Moen. Ignore her, Yin Shui. Yarrow Moen called out to Yin Shui in a low voice. Master, this is what you wanted, said Yin Shui respectfully after appearing. Then she placed a brocade pouch in front of the dressing table. Ian, well done. You may leave. Once Yin Shui left, Yarrow Moen ordered Ting Yu to sew all of the blood-colored pearls in the pouch onto her own clothes, then she put on the glazed agate ornaments on her head. In the end, Yarrow Moen finally took out a 9-luan hairpin from her jewelry box. This hairpin was made of pure gold and the workmanship was exquisite. Each phoenix tail was adorned with a bluish-green luminous pearl that complemented the jadeite on the phoenix head. It was exquisite beyond compare. When Yarrow Moen walked out of the bedroom, she saw Yi Juanqing sitting there silently, allowing Xia Furong to pick food for him. He only nodded occasionally but didn't say anything. The moment he heard the door open, Yi Juanqing suddenly looked up. However, when he saw Yarrow Moen's dazzling golden outfit, his expression froze. From what he could remember, this was the second time Yarrow Moen had dressed herself up as a peacock. The first time was when Feng Yihan came. Ever since he slammed the door and left last night, Yi Juanqing had been feeling uncomfortable. Whenever he thought about how all of the jewels Xia Furong was wearing came from Feng Yihan, he felt disgusted from the bottom of his heart. Feng Yihan was clearly doing this because he wanted Xia Furong to take him to Bactria. At that time, he would be able to write letters to Yarrow Moen without any restraint. Junqing greets Your Imperial Highness. Yi Junqing didn't think about this for now. He just felt that Yarrow Moen's appearance had saved him from the abyss of suffering. Furong greets Your Imperial Highness. This is Furong's first time in Great Chu and I don't know what Your Imperial Highness likes, so today I specially ordered a Z to prepare a table full of specialties from Bactria. I hope Your Imperial Highness will like it. Xia Furong greeted Yarrow Moen with a smile. When she saw Yarrow Moen's clothes, her eyes were instantly attracted by the blood-colored pearls on the clothes. Of course this consort likes good things to eat. Yarrow Moen happily placed her jade fingers on Xia Furong's hand, then followed Xia Furong over to the table. When Xia Furong saw the jade ring between Yarrow Moen's fingers, she couldn't help but swallow and a trace of greed flashed through her eyes. You like this? When Yarrow Moen saw that Xia Furong wasn't willing to let go, she widened her eyes and asked innocently. Ah, it's not that. Xia Furong knew that she'd lost control of herself and immediately retracted her jade finger. However, before she could finish speaking, she saw Yarrow Moen immediately take off the thumb ring, then grab Xia Furong's jade finger and forcibly put the thumb ring on her finger. Furong has plenty of these things. Your Imperial Highness, there's no need to give Furong any more. Xia Furong forcefully suppressed the pleasant surprise in her heart and pretended to refuse. Since you have plenty, then this one won't make much of a difference. Wanna also has plenty. His Majesty said that you're a guest, so Wanna should take good care of you. In the future, if you like anything, just tell Wanna and Wanna will give it all to you. Yarrow Moen didn't hold back at all as she smiled and continued to eat without a care in the world. At the side, Yi Junqing didn't know what Yarrow Moen was trying to do, but with his experience, he could tell with a single glance that the ring Yarrow Moen had just given Xia Furong wasn't worth much. In that case, then Furong thanks Your Imperial Highness. Xia Furong pretended to respond politely, but evil thoughts began to well up in her heart. So much so that after breakfast, Xia Furong didn't bother Yi Junqing. Instead, she stayed in Guan Osprey Palace to chat with Yarrow Moen. Yarrow Moen naturally dismissed Ting Yu and the others, then sat alone on the chaise lounge with Xia Furong as she chatted idly. Looking at Your Imperial Highness's luxurious attire, it's clear that King Yu really dotes on Your Imperial Highness. Xia Furong caressed the blood-colored pearls on Yarrow Moen's body, greedily refusing to move her fingers away. His Majesty really dotes on Wanna. He often sends a lot of fun things to Wanna, but after looking at these things for a long time, they won't be fresh anymore. Let's talk about these pearls. They're all red and aren't as pretty as the ones you're wearing. Yarrow Moen started to set traps. Is that so? If Your Imperial Highness likes the pearls on Furong's body, then Furong can trade with Your Imperial Highness. Xia Furong was pleasantly surprised and her eyes brightened. Really? You're willing to trade? Yarrow Moen put on an innocent expression, her pure eyes filled with innocence. Of course Furong is willing. Furong's meaning is that as long as I can make Your Imperial Highness smile, I'm willing to suffer a bit. Xia Furong forcefully suppressed the joy in her heart as she said this. Chapter 254. It's not good to feel wronged. Wanna never wronged others. Yarrow Moen looked towards Xia Furong with slight disappointment. I'm not wronged. Furong willingly exchanged with Your Highness. How could Xia Furong allow Yarrow Moen to go back on her word? That's good. Just wait, this consort will give this to you. Take it back and change before returning it to this consort. How about that? Asked Yarrow Moen seriously as she stood up. Of course. Xia Furong nodded fiercely as the greed in her eyes deepened. Seeing Yarrow Moen skip into the bedroom, Xia Furong called her an idiot. Anyone could see that the blood pearls on Yarrow Moen were more than 10 times more valuable than normal pearls. With this exchange, she'd earned at least 1,000 taels of gold, thought Xia Furong. When Yarrow Moen walked out of the bedroom, Shia Furong immediately got up to greet her. "This is for you, but we already agreed that this was what you wanted." "Wanna didn't force you," emphasized Yarrow Moen seriously. "Don't worry, Your Highness. Even if King Chu came, Furong would say the same." Shia Furong pretended to be humble as she accepted the clothes, then yawned and left Guan Osprey Palace. Once Shia Furong left, Yin Shui suddenly appeared next to Yarrow Moen. "Master, there's news from Ben Lei." As Yin Shui spoke, she handed the letter to Yarrow Moen. Yarrow Moen glanced in the direction Shia Furong had left in, and her lips curved in a meaningful smile. Only then did she walk over to the chaise lounge and sit down before opening the letter. Preposterous. When Yarrow Moen saw the contents of the letter, her expression abruptly changed. She stood up angrily and her eyes were as cold as ice. "Master." Yin Shui had never seen Yarrow Moen this angry before. In Yin Shui's eyes, Yarrow Moen seemed to have the power to control the entire situation. No matter how troublesome the situation was, Yarrow Moen would always be able to deal with it easily. "I was actually robbed. This consort has always been the one robbing others. I've never heard of anyone daring to rob this consort," roared Yarrow Moen through gritted teeth as she handed the letter to Yin Shui. Yin Shui took the letter and opened it in her hand. She looked down and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Reporting to Master, the silk, tea, and ironware transported by Yarrow Manifest Trade to various countries within the past 3 days have been robbed at the same time. We have lost 2,000 taels of gold. This subordinate and the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning have investigated to no avail. Right now, all the caravans of Yarrow Manifest Trade have stopped shipping and await Master's instructions. Looking at the letter in her hand, Yin Shui's eyebrows tightly knitted together. Soon after, she tightly clenched the letter in her hand, causing it to instantly turn into ashes. Master, based on Yarrow Manifest Trade's prestige in Mongyuan, normal bandits wouldn't dare to provoke it. Now that Yarrow Manifest Trade has been robbed for 3 days in a row, this subordinate believes that someone is deliberately opposing Yarrow Manifest Trade. Yin Shui looked towards Yarrow Moen worriedly. Who could it be? Yarrow Moen's eyes narrowed as she pondered. An ominous premonition welled up in her heart. This subordinate will send a letter to the Yin clan in a moment. "I hope they can share Master's burden," Yin Shui said solemnly. "Absolutely not." Yarrow Moen immediately refused. Yin Shui looked towards Yarrow Moen in confusion. She wanted to ask, but didn't say anything in the end. If this consort's guess isn't wrong, this person is most likely that god of plague, Chu Morbei. If it really is him, then the reason he's making such a big move is to muddy the waters and use the clues to find the person behind the scenes of Yarrow Manifest Trade. Moen is grateful that you've thought of asking the Yin clan for help, but with Yin Xiong present, Chu Morbei will naturally find out about this matter. In this world, the only people who can mobilize the Yin clan are you and Yin Xiong. At that time, he'll be able to easily guess that the person behind Yarrow Manifest Trade is this consort. Yarrow Moen explained carefully. This subordinate was careless. Then what should we do now? Yin Shui suddenly understood and inwardly admired Yarrow Moen's meticulousness. Send a reply to Ben Lei. From today onwards, all of Yarrow Manifest Trade's caravans are to be stopped. All transactions are to be carried out in Mongyuan, said Yarrow Moen solemnly. But continuing like this isn't a solution, right? Yin Shui was deeply worried. She knew very well that the majority of Mongyuan's income came from trade with other countries, so local transactions actually didn't earn much. Have Ben Lei and the others endure it for now. This consort will naturally think of a way to deal with those bandits blocking the way. Yarrow Moen suddenly thought of someone and her lips curved into a smile. Master, it can't be that you want Yang Nansheng to make an appearance, right? Yin Shui's lips twitched. Thanks to Yarrow Moen, whenever she entered Phoenix Feather Manor, all the servants would look at her like she was a thief. As time passed, she had already become the most unwelcome guest in Phoenix Feather Manor, not just one of them. Make the best use of everything and make the best use of the person's talent. This consort thinks highly of him. Yarrow Moen smiled resentfully. Master is wise. Yin Shui nodded firmly. Yang Nansheng really hadn't thought that Master would think highly of him. That was what Yin Shui thought. That night, the full moon hung high in the sky. The moonlight was bright and clear, sprinkling silver fragments on the ground. Inside Harmony Palace, Xia Furong personally supervised RZ and Bai to remove the pearls from their clothes and swap them with Yarrow Moen's. With the lesson from before, RZ and Bai were extremely careful in their actions, afraid that they would damage the pearls in their hands again. These pearls that were incomparably precious in Xia Furong's eyes were nothing more than venomous snakes in RZ and Bai's eyes. If they were the slightest bit careless, they would attract a fatal disaster. That idiot Yarrow Moen actually used such precious blood pearls to exchange with this consort. With this exchange, this consort can earn at least 1,000 taels of gold. With this 1,000 taels, this consort can rebuild the prince consort's residence. Xia Furong rubbed her cheeks as she looked forward to the luxurious life she was about to live. The corners of her lips couldn't help but curve into a smile. Princess, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights came over today and said that the Yu King has set the time for you and the prince consort to leave you in 10 days. RZ suddenly understood and immediately reported. It's only been 10 days. Xia Furong said with some disappointment. Didn't Princess want to go back as soon as possible? RZ looked towards Xia Furong suspiciously. How could this consort have known that Yarrow Moen was such an easy person to deceive? Wouldn't it be better if we could get more money from her? You two better be careful. If even one of them is damaged, see if this consort doesn't twist off your heads. As Xia Furong looked at the blood-colored pearls in front of her, her dark eyes lit up even more. RZ and Bai instantly became 100 times more alert as they carefully put on the pearls. The next day, Yarrow Moen used the same method and used the rainbow-colored scales on her clothes to replace the golden scales on Xia Furong's body. As a result, Xia Furong didn't bother Yi Junqing for the next 2 days. Yesterday, someone from the Ministry of Rights came and told this prince to prepare and return to Bactria with the honored princess in 9 days. Have you thought of a way yet? Even without Xia Furong, Yi Junqing's heart was still heavy. Why would Moen need to think of a way? Yarrow Moen didn't agree. 2,000 taels of gold. This 2,000 taels of gold already includes this prince's deed to the esteemed prince's residence. Yi Junqing clenched his teeth as he raised 2 fingers. The meaning behind his words was that 2,000 taels of gold was his limit. Prince should just prepare to avoid missing the time. Yarrow Moen remained unmoved. Yarrow Moen, you're too heartless. When Yi Junqing saw that Yarrow Moen didn't say anything, he slapped the table and got up. Just as he was about to leave, Yarrow Moen called him back. Chapter 255. Ahem. Since Prince wants to talk about feelings with this consort, then this consort won't talk about money. Yi Junqing immediately returned to his seat and looked towards Yarrow Moen with sparkling eyes. Really? Yi Junqing rubbed his eyes. It was like he was looking at a bodhisattva sitting in front of him. Of course, talking about money hurts feelings. Yarrow Moen nodded seriously. Then you have a way to help this prince cancel this marriage? Yi Junqing had never felt that Yarrow Moen's image was so lofty. There is a way, but... Yarrow Moen lifted her brows. Her eyes were like crescent moons and her smile was like a flower. Didn't you say you don't want to talk about money? Yi Junqing immediately narrowed his eyes. If Prince can persuade Yang Nansheng to help Moen resolve Meng Yuan's problems, this consort can guarantee that even the Emperor of Heaven won't be able to take Prince away. Yarrow Moen vowed solemnly. Yi Junqing was speechless. The stiff smile on his face shattered bit by bit and 3 black lines appeared on his forehead. Why don't you go ask for it yourself? Yi Junqing finally realized something. Even if he waited until the end of time, Yarrow Moen still wouldn't show him mercy. Didn't he refuse to see this consort? Yarrow Moen tugged on Yi Junqing's wide sleeves coquettishly. Her voice was as soft as a jasper flower. Then do you think that he really wants to see this prince? Yi Junqing countered with a question. To Yang Nansheng, Yarrow Moen, Yi Junqing, and Yin Shui were the three great malefic stars of his birth that he wanted to avoid. Moen believes that Prince will have a way. Unless Prince wants to be the son-in-law, or if Prince can take out 5,000 taels of gold. Yarrow Moen returned to the main topic and stopped haggling with Yi Junqing. Yarrow Moen if this prince had money, this prince definitely wouldn't talk about feelings with you. Yi Junqing's voice was like a cuckoo crying blood. When Yarrow Moen saw Yi Junqing fling his sleeves and leave, she knew that this matter had been settled. The first rain of autumn was pattering down. The fine raindrops fell on the body, driving away the heat of the end of summer, making people feel a little more refreshed. In the imperial garden, Xia Furong jogged to catch up to Yi Junqing. She casually stretched out her long sleeves in an attempt to shelter Yi Junqing from the rain. Yi Junqing had no intention of wasting time with her, so he reflexively walked faster to the pavilion. The rain came so fast. Xia Furong smoothed out the long hair in front of her chest as she looked towards Yi Junqing with a sigh. These past few days, no matter how she tried to curry favor with him, she wasn't able to get even a hint of a smile from him. Even with the marriage contract in hand, Xia Furong was still a little worried. Does Prince remember that the first time Furong met Prince was in the rain? At the time of the Battle of Changping, Prince was passing through Bactria. In order to see Prince, Furong had intentionally slipped out of the imperial palace and waited for Prince on the path that the army had to pass through. At that time, the rain was just like this, but in order to see Prince, Furong couldn't bear to leave. In the end, just as Xia Furong was getting excited, Arbai suddenly called out to her. Princess, you. Before Arbai could finish, Xia Furong abruptly turned around and glared at Arbai, ordering her to shut up. Arbai immediately fell silent, a conflicted expression on her face. When Xia Furong turned around, she happened to see Yi Junqing's gaze land on her. Xia Furong was delighted, thinking that her story had moved Yi Junqing, so she continued. Furong was finally able to see Prince's elegant demeanor. In the drizzling rain, Prince was like an immortal riding the wind. Prince's silvery armor made Prince look majestic. It was at that time. Just as Xia Furong was getting infatuated with her story, Yi Junqing finally couldn't take it anymore. Junqing feels that Princess should perhaps change your clothes. Yi Junqing reminded her with good intentions. Xia Furong froze slightly when she heard this, then immediately lowered her eyes. She was shocked to see that the plain white long gown she was wearing had actually been dyed with all sorts of colors. The rainbow-colored scales on her shoulders had already turned black. If she looked closely, it was clearly iron. As for the blood-colored pearls on the folds of her dress, after the color faded, it was revealed that they were the most worthless green ceramic balls. How could this be? Xia Furong was stunned, but then she suddenly thought of Yi Junqing who was next to her. She immediately covered her face and ran back to Harmony Palace. Inside Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moen was leaning against the window, her clear eyes filled with sorrow. Your Highness, what's wrong? Asked Tingyu worriedly as she draped a purple satin shawl over Yarrow Moen's shoulders. This autumn rain came a little early. This consort still hasn't managed to swindle Xia Furong's phoenix hairpin out of her hair. What a pity, what a pity. While Yarrow Moen was upset, Tingyu collapsed. Right at this moment, a burst of noise came from the main hall. Your Highness, Her Highness the Empress is currently resting. Please come back later, or perhaps have this servant report. Liu Xing did his best to block, but he still wasn't able to stop Xia Furong, who seemed to have gone crazy. Yarrow Moen, you idiot. Hurry up and scram out here. Come out. Xia Furong's eyes looked like they were going to split open. Her malevolent expression was like that of a malicious spirit from hell, causing others to tremble in fear. Your Highness, this is Great Chu's Imperial Palace. The place you're standing in is where the Empress of Chu resides. If you continue to speak rudely, Liu Xing will report this to His Majesty. I believe that His Majesty definitely won't allow my Highness to suffer any grievances. Although Liu Xing didn't dare to make a move, he couldn't tolerate Xia Furong cursing his master like this. Suffer grievances? This consort didn't hear wrong, right? She, Yarrow Moen, would suffer grievances. Didn't you want to call King Yu over? Go then. Go call King Yu over right now. This consort wants to confront Yarrow Moen face to face. Everyone says that Yarrow Moen is an idiot, but that's because they're blind. Xia Furong roared at Liu Xing, her voice so loud that Liu Xing's head hurt. Liu Xing, go stand guard outside the door. A leisurely voice came from the inner room. Yarrow Moen stretched lazily, then walked towards Xia Furong. Yarrow Moen, you actually dare to come out to see this consort. Return the pearls to this consort. Return the golden scales to this consort. Return them all to this consort. Xia Furong opened her bloody mouth like a lion, wanting nothing more than to swallow Yarrow Moen into her stomach in one gulp. Based on what? Yarrow Moen had an expression that said she wanted to anger people to death as she swayed over to the chaise lounge and sat down. She casually pulled Fluffy into her arms. Perhaps it was because she had been with Yarrow Moen for a long time, but Fluffy had also become calmer and calmer. However, Jewel had scuttled away the moment Xia Furong had rushed in. You still have the nerve to ask what based? Bai, show it to her. Xia Furong stomped her feet and rushed in front of Yarrow Moen, her expression as cold as ice. At this moment, Bai had already brought over the multicolored gown. What's wrong with this gown? Yarrow Moen's eyes widened as she asked in confusion. What's wrong? Look. These are the rainbow-colored scales and blood pearls that you exchanged with this consort. They're all fake. Do you admit it or not? Xia Furong picked up the gown and threw it at Yarrow Moen's feet as she questioned angrily. Of course I admit it. This consort was the one who exchanged with you. Is there a problem? Yarrow Moen looked towards Xia Furong innocently as she asked in reply. Can't you see the problem yourself? These are all fake. You used these pieces of scrap metal to exchange for this consort's pearls and golden scales. Yarrow Moen, return the things that you tricked this consort out of, and perhaps this consort will let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, this consort will definitely go to King Chu and expose you. I'll let the entire world know that you're not stupid at all and that you're just pretending to be stupid. How could Xia Furong not be anxious? Imperial father had borrowed those things from King Chi. If she lost them, how would she return them? Firstly, when you were exchanging, Moen asked you more than once if you were willing. You don't need Moen to remind you how you answered, right? Secondly, go and find His Majesty right now. Moen is the Empress of Chu and you're just a princess of a poor country. Who do you think His Majesty will side with? Also, how do you know that His Majesty doesn't know that I'm stupid? And how do you guarantee that His Majesty will believe your words? Yarrow Moen's questions left Xia Furong speechless. Chapter 256. Yarrow Moen, you're too sinister. You're the mother of the country and you don't lack those things, so why are you trying to frame Ben Gong? Xia Furong clenched her fists and veins popped out on her forehead. It's not exactly framing, I just want to make a deal with your highness. Yarrow Moen lifted her brows as she spoke in a serious tone. What kind of deal? Xia Furong looked towards Yarrow Moen in confusion. As long as your highness can cancel the engagement, Moen will not only return those pearls and scales to Princess, but will also give 10 times the reward as thanks. Yarrow Moen got straight to the point. You don't want the esteemed prince to marry Ben Gong? Why? Could it be that you? Yarrow Moen, you have no sense of honor. Xia Furong suddenly realized and rebuked her harshly. Everyone loves beauty. The esteemed prince is so tender and lovely, who wouldn't want to take a bite out of him? There's nothing wrong with Moen doing this. Of course, Princess can refuse, but before you refuse, Princess should think carefully. Those things add up to at least 1,000 taels of gold. I wonder if Bactria's national treasury has enough to return to Feng Yihan, said Yarrow Moen resentfully as she smiled coldly towards Xia Furong. You. Yarrow Moen. This consort won't let this go. Shia Furong was momentarily speechless. She stomped her feet and turned to leave Guan Osprey Palace. Behind her, Arbai didn't forget to pick up the clothes on the ground. Only after Shia Furong left did Yarrow Moen turn to look at the inner room. She's already left. Does Prince still not plan on coming out? Just as Yarrow Moen was about to speak, the door to the inner room opened and Yi Junqing walked out with a red face. Which eye of yours saw that this prince is tender and delicate? You're the tender and delicate one. Yi Junqing clearly disliked this description a lot. There's no need for Prince to say it. Moen also knows that I'm tender and delicate. Yarrow Moen raised a finger to lightly flick her cheek as she replied proudly. Are you sure that Shia Furong will hold back and ask His Majesty to cancel the engagement? Yi Junqing ignored her and continued to ask. Unless she can gather the money, she has no other choice, said Yarrow Moen confidently. Then what if she really can gather the money? Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moen with a bit of worry. Then we'll wait for her to raise the money first, said Yarrow Moen lightly as she casually put down Fluffy. Yi Junqing took a deep breath, then looked towards Yarrow Moen. This prince has already sent a letter to Yang Nansheng. You better fulfill your promise. Yi Junqing knew what Yarrow Moen wanted to hear. Don't worry, Your Highness. She has a plan and I have a ladder to climb over the wall. No matter what, Ben Gong will not joke around with Your Highness' marriage. Yarrow Moen smiled faintly as she walked to Yi Junqing's side. She suddenly reached out and tapped Yi Junqing's cheek. What are you doing? Yi Junqing practically bounced back a few steps as he looked towards Yarrow Moen in shock. Prince is truly tender. Yarrow Moen nodded in apparent seriousness. Yi Junqing froze in place. That night, in Harmony Palace, Shia Furong was venting her anger on Arbai and Azi when she suddenly heard a feminine voice coming from outside. That Yarrow Moen really does have some ability. She's actually angered the noble princess to this extent. Shia Furong recognized the owner of the voice and saw that a woman dressed in magnificent clothing had appeared in Harmony Palace. She was holding a brocade bag in her hand. Who are you? Why have you come to Ben Gong's place? Shia Furong was slightly startled. Only then did she put down her palm that had been raised in the air. At this moment, RZ and Arbai's faces were already extremely swollen. This one is Great Chu's noble consort Li. Princess can also call me Sulwan. As for the purpose of coming to Harmony Palace, Yarrow Sulwan deliberately kept him in suspense. She gracefully walked to the table and casually placed the bag on the table. Her jade-like fingers flipped the bag open and a silver light suddenly shot out. This is... Shia Furong looked towards Yarrow Sulwan in confusion. This is a top-quality luminous pearl. Whether it's the quality or the color, it's all top quality. Yarrow Sulwan took out the luminous pearl from the bag and proudly waved it in front of Shia Furong. Unexpectedly, Shia Furong suddenly snatched the luminous pearl and threw it to the ground. Pa! This lousy thing isn't even worth a fart. Yarrow Moen, that damned thief, hasn't she tricked Ben Gong enough? She actually sent someone to trick me again. Get out of here. Before coming to Great Chu, Shia Furong had already made inquiries about everyone in Chu Palace. Of course she knew that this self-proclaimed noble consort Li, Yarrow Sulwan, was Yarrow Moen's older sister. She was angry that she had mistakenly believed Yarrow Moen. If she believed Yarrow Sulwan now, then she would be even stupider than a pig. Yarrow Sulwan was speechless. The corners of her lips twitched and several black lines appeared on her forehead. Princess has misunderstood. Sulwan and that Yarrow Moen are irreconcilable enemies, so how could I help her? If Princess doesn't believe me, you can examine it carefully. Whether it's that luminous pearl or the pearls and gold bars in the bag, they're all genuine. Yarrow Sulwan explained calmly, but inside, she was cursing this ignorant fellow in front of her 81 times. If you say it's genuine, then Ben Gong has to believe it. Seeing the sincerity in Yarrow Sulwan's eyes, Shia Furong raised her brows. She couldn't help but pick up a gold bar and put it into her mouth. What does Princess think? When Yarrow Sulwan saw Shia Furong's method of examination, she felt that Great Shia was truly endlessly poor. A dignified princess actually couldn't see through the quality of the gold bars. It's all right. But what are you doing with these? For the sake of the gold bars, Shia Furong decided to believe Yarrow Sulwan's words for the time being. Naturally, to send charcoal in snowy weather. Sulwan knows that Princess has suffered at Yarrow Moan's hands, so Sulwan specially offered these things in hopes that they can help Princess out of your urgent need. Ever since Yarrow Moan had reminded her to leave the Imperial Palace that day, Yarrow Sulwan had really had this thought. The world was high and the road was long. As long as she left the Imperial Palace, she would no longer be under Yi Hongyi's control. At that time, she could rely on the money she had accumulated in the palace over the years to live a prosperous life. As for her dream of being an empress, she had completely woken up. What do you want Ben Gong to do? Shia Furong wasn't stupid and immediately questioned. As long as Princess can bring Sulwan out of the Imperial City, Sulwan will be endlessly grateful. Yarrow Sulwan directly expressed her intentions. Does the Grand Noble Consort of Great Chu need to be so sneaky if she wants to leave the Imperial Palace? Shia Furong clearly didn't believe her. It's a long story. Sulwan doesn't have any other requests. If Princess can help Sulwan leave the Imperial City, then these will belong to Princess. If you don't agree. As Yarrow Sulwan spoke, she reached out to take the gold bars from Shia Furong's hands. It's a deal. Shia Furong immediately grabbed the brocade bag on the table. This could be considered as agreeing to Yarrow Sulwan's request. Yarrow Sulwan was inwardly delighted that Shia Furong didn't refuse. It's getting late, so Sulwan won't disturb Princess's rest any longer. Yarrow Sulwan didn't want to stay in Harmony Palace for too long. After all, this place was too close to Guan Osprey Palace. That's right, Ben Gong has something to ask you. Does that Yarrow Moan like the esteemed prince? Shia Furong's straightforward question startled Yarrow Sulwan. This. What should Sulwan say? In any case, whatever Princess sees is what it is. Yarrow Sulwan didn't add fuel to the fire. Right now, her goal was to leave the palace, so she couldn't complicate matters. Then what about the esteemed prince? Does the esteemed prince also like Yarrow Moan? Shia Furong looked towards Yarrow Sulwan anxiously. How could the esteemed prince be an ordinary person? He naturally wouldn't like that kind of mediocre woman. Princess, don't worry. Yarrow Sulwan deliberately reassured Shia Furong, but inwardly, she felt a bit of pity. It was a pity that Yi Juanqing's good looks had ended up benefiting such a poor fellow. Chapter 257. I understand. You can leave. Shia Furong waved her hand doubtfully. Her tone was cold and completely devoid of respect. Yarrow Sulwan didn't bother arguing with her and immediately turned to return to Pure Flower's palace. The next day, when Shia Furong appeared in Guan Osprey Palace, Yi Juanqing couldn't eat anymore. When he saw the luminous pearl on Shia Furong's waist, he knew that Shia Furong had managed to raise the money. What should I do? Yi Juanqing looked towards Yarrow Moan with sorrow in his eyes, his voice low and filled with despair. Otherwise, Prince should really just marry her. Cough cough. It's just marry her, suggested Yarrow Moan sincerely. Yarrow Moan. Yi Juanqing glared at Yarrow Moan hatefully. Furong greets Prince. At this time, Shia Furong had already walked over and was bowing towards Yi Juanqing tenderly. With the lesson from earlier, Yi Juanqing didn't plan on returning the greeting and just nodded casually. That pearl on your waist is so pretty. Wanna has an even better one. Do you want to exchange? Yarrow Moan reached out to touch the luminous pearl on Shia Furong's waist. Shia Furong immediately retreated a few steps, her eyes cold. This consort appreciates Niang Niang's good intentions. With Yi Juanqing present, it wasn't good for Shia Furong to flare up. That's truly a pity. Yarrow Moan's sharp eyes glanced at that bead and the corners of her lips curved faintly. She clearly remembered that this bead was something Yi Hongyi had bestowed upon Yarrow Sulwan many years ago. It seems like the fish has taken the bait. Junqing has finished eating. I'll be taking my leave. Yi Junqing felt vexed, so he got up and saluted before walking out of Guan Osprey Palace. When Xia Furong saw Yi Junqing leave, she was just about to chase after him when she suddenly thought of something and turned around. Yarrow Moen, let this consort give you a piece of advice. A person has a face and a tree has its bark. Now that the esteemed prince is this consort's husband, don't have any more ideas about him. As for those pearls from before, this consort will just treat it as giving them to a beggar. Xia Furong raised her head and looked towards Yarrow Moen arrogantly. That's quite a coincidence. Moen threw those worthless things onto the street yesterday. They're probably in the hands of a beggar by now. Yarrow Moen's eyes curved into crescents and her smile was as brilliant as a flower. Her eyes were filled with ridicule. You. Me. Xia Furong glared at Yarrow Moen before leaving Guan Osprey Palace. After Xia Furong left, Tingyu suspiciously looked towards her master. Niang Niang, did you really throw her playthings onto the streets? TSK. Do you think that Ben Gong is someone who hates money and bites my hand? Yarrow Mo Wan disapprovingly replied. Tingyu was speechless. She suddenly felt that her question was too stupid. What do we do now? Xia Furong now has reinforcements, so how could she possibly break off the engagement? Asked Tingyu worriedly. Don't forget, this peace marriage wasn't decided by Xia Furong. Yarrow Moen lowered her eyes to stroke Fluffy as an indecipherable light flashed through her eyes. Although Tingyu didn't understand, she still relaxed. She had truly forgotten that there was nothing Master couldn't do if she wanted to do it. After leaving Guan Osprey Palace, Xia Furong searched for about an hour before she finally saw Yi Junqing in the pavilion on Jade Lake. Prince, you're here. Furong sure took Furong a long time to find you. Xia Furong lightly wiped away the beads of sweat on her forehead and smiled like a flower as she walked gracefully into the pavilion. Princess is looking for Junqing? Yi Junqing couldn't say that he hated Xia Furong, but he definitely didn't like her. It's nothing important. It's just that the Ministry of Rites has decided on a date. Furong wants to know how Prince's luggage preparation is going. If Prince doesn't mind, Furong can have a Bai and the others help Prince organize it, or Furong can personally prepare it for Prince. Xia Furong truly liked Yi Junqing. From that first glance many years ago, she had made a vow that she wouldn't marry anyone other than him. If that wasn't the case, Emperor Xia wouldn't have shamelessly asked Yi Hongyi for a peace marriage. He knew very well that Great Xia and Great Chu weren't on the same level. In front of Great Chu, Xia was nothing but a poor ghost. However, what surprised Emperor Xia was that not only did Yi Hongyi agree to his peace marriage, he even agreed to let Yi Junqing enter Xia. Emperor Xia had never expected that something as good as a meat pie falling from the sky would land on him. To tell you the truth, Junqing hasn't prepared any luggage, nor has he ever thought about leaving Great Chu. Yi Junqing was still worried about Yarrow Moen, so he decided to speak frankly to Xia Furong. Xia Furong was stunned and looked towards Yi Junqing in confusion. Prince means that you want Furong to stay in Great Chu? Xia Furong only hesitated for a moment before making up her mind. As long as she could be with Yi Junqing, even if she couldn't return to Xia, it would still be worth it. Junqing means that I won't take Princess as my wife. I hope that Princess can understand. Yi Junqing really wanted to use tactful words to make this sentence sound beautiful and pleasant to the ear, but he really didn't know what to add to make Xia Furong feel more comfortable. Yi Junqing's words were like a bolt from the blue that rang in Xia Furong's ears. Xia Furong's brows furrowed and her voice trembled slightly. Prince isn't joking with Furong, right? This marriage was something that King Yu had personally written and agreed to my imperial father's request. Furthermore, Furong hadn't heard any opposition on the way here. Furong is truly unable to understand Prince's words. Xia Furong's eyes became misty as she choked back her tears. In reality, Junqing had only received His Majesty's verbal edict the day before Princess arrived in Great Chu. Junqing had wanted to ask His Majesty to cancel the marriage at first notice, but His Majesty had refused to see him. However, This couldn't change Juanqing's decision. I hope that princess will forgive me for my lack of manners. Yi Juanqing's voice was like rain pattering on celadon, clear and pleasant to the ear. Apologies, forgive Furong for not being able to understand or forgive. Furong only knows that this trip was to fulfill Imperial Father's orders to reconcile the marriage. No matter what Prince thinks, Furong will not change my original intentions. Xia Furong's eyes were brimming with tears and her voice was heavy with sobs. Princess, there's no need to. Before Yi Junqing could finish, Xia Furong had already turned and walked down the pavilion, sobbing as she left. That night, in Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moen was looking at the letter that Ben Lei had sent over. A trace of worry flashed through her eyes. Master, now that Yang Nanxing has lent a hand, it can be said that the immediate worry has been resolved, comforted Yin Shui. The immediate worry has been resolved, but after this incident, I'm afraid that the stronghold in Mongyuan has been targeted. Yarrow Moen sighed lightly, then destroyed the letter. I can only hope that those people really are bandits, said Yin Shui indifferently. If they aren't bandits, this consort isn't afraid of them. Soldiers come with arms, water comes with an earth weir. If they dare to play any more tricks, this consort will personally deal with them. Oh right, do you think that Phoenix Feather Manor will be able to take out another 1 million taels of gold? Yarrow Moen returned to the main topic and looked towards Yin Shui solemnly. Ahem. This subordinate feels that. Master should be lenient. Don't force Yang Nanxing into a corner. Advised Yin Shui sincerely. Then forget it. Write back to Ben Lei and tell him to pay a deposit to the Prince of Shiliang first. The rest of the money will be given to him when we pick up the horses. Yarrow Moen felt that Yin Shui's words were reasonable. Yang Nanxing was also a person, he wouldn't be able to withstand repeated provocations. Meanwhile, in Harmony Palace, Xia Furong was furiously swinging her sleeves and sweeping all the porcelain pots and teacups on the table onto the floor. Princess, please calm your anger. Now that we have the Prince of Yu's imperial edict, the peace marriage is set in stone. The esteemed prince has no choice but to be willing. Bai timidly stood next to Xia Furong as she cautiously consoled her. Why isn't he willing? Why? With this consort's appearance, even 10 Yarrow Moens can't compare. He actually refused the peace marriage for that broken flower. At the side, Bai and RZ exchanged glances, not daring to say anything. In reality, in their eyes, their master's appearance wasn't even on the same level as Yarrow Moen's. If their master was a butterfly, then Yarrow Moen was a peacock. If their master was a peacock, then Yarrow Moen was a phoenix. In short, they were several levels apart. Chapter 258. No, this consort can't just sit and wait for death. Lead the way, this consort wants to see Yarrow Sulwan. Xia Furong's eyes flashed, then she strode out of Harmony Palace. RZ and Bai didn't dare to tarry, so they lit their lanterns and walked in front. Fortunately, they had already asked around for the locations of the various palaces, so they didn't have to rush around. When Xia Furong arrived at Pure Flowers Palace, Yarrow Sulwan was just about to go to bed. I didn't think that such a large Pure Flowers Palace wouldn't even have a palace made to pass on messages. Your position as a noble consort is a bit poor. Xia Furong suppressed the anger and worry in her heart as she looked around. Although there weren't any maids, the furnishings in Pure Flowers Palace were all precious. Xia Furong suddenly felt that the heavens were unfair. They were both members of the imperial family, so why did she have to be born in such a poor country? Sulwan didn't know that Princess was coming and didn't go out to welcome you. Princess, please don't blame me. Yarrow Sulwan found the word poor unimaginable when it came out of Xia Furong's mouth. It's nothing. This consort just couldn't sleep, so I came to sit. Xia Furong wanted Yarrow Sulwan to help, but she couldn't bring herself to say it out loud. Actually, in front of Sulwan, Princess can speak frankly. As long as Sulwan can help, I won't say anything else. After all, Sulwan still needs to rely on Princess in order to leave the imperial palace. Yarrow Sulwan could tell that Shia Furong wanted to say something, so she spoke up respectfully. This consort wants to kill Yarrow Moen. Shia Furong hesitated for a moment before throwing down this threat. Yarrow Sulwan was slightly startled when she heard this, but she sneered inwardly. Newborn calves truly weren't afraid of tigers. Back then, she hadn't even been able to touch a single hair on Yarrow Moen's head, so what did Shia Furong have? Why would Princess have this kind of thought? If this was in the past, Yarrow Sulwan naturally wouldn't let go of this chance, but now, she absolutely couldn't let Shia Furong take this risk. Shia Furong was her only hope of leaving the palace. If it wasn't for that vixen Yarrow Moen, how could the esteemed prince have refused the peace marriage? This consort feels that only Yarrow Moen's death can end the esteemed prince's thought. Whenever Shia Furong recalled how resolute Yi Junqing had been at the time, she felt her blood boil. She wanted nothing more than to rush into Guan Osprey Palace right now and strangle Yarrow Moen to death. Sulwan predicted that Prince would refuse, but it's not because of Yarrow Moen. Yarrow Sulwan's lips curved slightly as she changed the topic. Then who? Shia Furong looked towards Yarrow Sulwan in confusion. The former empress, Yarrow Morsheen. The esteemed prince's love for Yarrow Morsheen was no longer a secret in Great Chu. To speak disrespectfully, if it weren't for Yarrow Morsheen back then, the one sitting on the dragon throne today wouldn't be the current emperor. Now that Yarrow Morsheen is dead, esteemed prince has placed his feelings on Yarrow Moen. It's just to reminisce about that dead person. Why must Princess make life difficult for a dead person? Yarrow Sulwan earnestly tried to persuade her. So that's how it is. But Yi Junqing is determined not to return to Bactria with this consort. What should we do? Shia Furong looked towards Yarrow Sulwan for help. Sulwan does have an idea, but I'm afraid Princess won't be willing, said Yarrow Sulwan awkwardly. Just say it, urged Shia Furong. Yarrow Sulwan didn't say anything. She just walked into the bedroom with a smile. When she came out, she was holding a purple glass box. As long as Princess has a way to get the esteemed prince into your bedroom, once the rice is cooked, everything will fall into place. As Yarrow Sulwan spoke, she opened the glass box to reveal 2 red pills. You actually dare to incite this consort to do such a despicable thing. Shia Furong's face instantly flushed red as she glared at Yarrow Sulwan. Sulwan was only suggesting. Since Princess isn't willing, then forget it. However, Sulwan must remind Princess that the esteemed prince rarely changes his mind, not even His Majesty. Yarrow Sulwan didn't seem to mind and closed the glass box. Just as she was about to get up, Shia Furong called her back. Actually, this consort and the esteemed prince have been engaged for a long time. Those things are just a matter of time, but are you sure that Yi Junqing won't go back on his word after the matter is done? Shia Furong was moved. She had come here for Yi Junqing, so how could she return empty-handed? The esteemed prince is an upright gentleman, he still has the most basic sense of responsibility, replied Yarrow Sulwan confidently. Hand it over. Shia Furong decisively reached out and took the glass box from Yarrow Sulwan's hands. This matter needs to be discussed at length. At that time, Sulwan will definitely lend Princess a helping hand. Yarrow Sulwan rejoiced inwardly. If she could help Shia Furong snatch Yi Junqing away from Yarrow Moen's hands, she would be able to vent her anger. The next day, after breakfast, Shia Furong went to find Yi Junqing according to the plan she had discussed with Yarrow Sulwan last night. Is Prince intentionally avoiding Sulwan? In the Imperial Garden, Shia Furong walked over to Yi Junqing's side with small steps. Her voice was slightly choked up. Princess is worrying too much. Junqing is only going out for a walk. Yi Junqing had intentionally kept his distance from Shia Furong. This morning, he had confessed to Yarrow Moen about how he had rejected Shia Furong, but in return, Yarrow Moen had said, "Are you stupid? Furong has heard Prince's words yesterday. Since Prince isn't willing to take Furong as your wife, Furong naturally won't force you. Being able to see Prince again is already Furong's good fortune. Right now, Furong doesn't have any other requests. I only hope that Prince can come to Harmony Palace for a short visit so that Furong can personally brew a pot of butterfly fragrance that I brought from Xia and invite Prince to have a taste. Xia Furong looked towards Yi Junqing expectantly. This. All right. Yi Junqing already felt guilty, so it wouldn't be good to reject Xia Furong's good intentions, so he reluctantly nodded. In Guan Osprey Palace, Yin Shui handed Ben Lei's urgent secret letter to Yarrow Moen. Reporting to Master, several dozen shops with the name Thousand Paths have suddenly appeared in Mengyuan. They are involved in silk, tea, ironware, rice, and many other industries. Furthermore, their prices are all 10% cheaper than Yarrow Manifest Store. Right now, Yarrow Manifest Store's income has dropped by 70%. This subordinate and the elements have been investigating in secret, but to no avail. This subordinate requests Master's instructions. As she looked at the letter in her hands, the veins on Yarrow Moen's forehead bulged and her eyes turned cold. She clenched the letter into a fist. Master, what do we do now? Yin Shui looked towards Yarrow Moen worriedly. Even a tenth cheaper can't make any money. It was obvious that Thousand Paths was targeting Yarrow Manifest crews. It seems that someone is going against this consort. Cutting off a person's path to wealth is the same as killing their parent. This consort better not let this consort find this bastard, otherwise this consort will slaughter his entire family, dig up his ancestors' graves. Yarrow Moen growled through gritted teeth as she handed the letter to Yin Shui. Yin Shui naturally destroyed it. Yin Shui believes that this person is definitely very powerful. Otherwise, he wouldn't have rashly gone against Yarrow Manifest Store, said Yin Shui. Isn't it just throwing money? What's so great about that? Yarrow Moen took a deep breath and tried to suppress the anger in her heart. Master wants to throw money at him? Yin Shui tried to figure out her intentions. Do you think that Yang Nansheng would be willing to pay this amount? Yarrow Moen looked towards Yin Shui seriously. Yin Shui instantly fell silent, but she was sweating for Yang Nansheng inside. Tell Ben Lei and the others to close all the shops from today onward. Yarrow Moen sighed and gave up on that idea. She didn't want to provoke Yang Nansheng too early. Just as Yarrow Moen stopped talking, Tingyu rushed in. Your Highness, Yarrow Sulwan is outside. She says she wants to see Your Highness. When Yarrow Moen heard this, she turned to look at Yin Shui. Yin Shui cupped her hands slightly and disappeared from the main hall of Guan Osprey Palace. When Yarrow Sulwan came in, Yarrow Moen was sitting on the chaise longue and hugging Jewel. Actually, calling it Jewel was already a bit inappropriate. Jewel had grown incomparably sturdy and was even bigger than Fluffy. Sulwan greets Your Highness. Yarrow Sulwan slowly walked in front of Yarrow Moen and said respectfully, You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.